Story 1.
My wife cheated on me with her boss and wanted an open marriage, so I took everything and disappeared. I stood in a dim corner of the ballroom, observing a couple swaying on the dance floor, their eyes fixed on each other. As her partner drew her closer, the woman's chest rose and fell, her small frame pressed against his large one. Their movements were graceful, he with the agility of an athlete, she following suit admirably. All eyes were on them, sensing a strong emotional connection, perhaps not love, but certainly more than friendship. Her honey blonde hair cascaded gently as she leaned into him, though her proximity was more a result of his firm grip than her own choice. I might have been envious of their bond if the woman weren't my wife of 11 years, now in the embrace of her boss. Instead, I felt a surge of anger and humiliation. It wasn't the first time we'd attended her company's annual awards banquet, and everyone there knew she was married to me. I noticed people searching for me, anticipating the inevitable confrontation. After 3 dances, they left the dance floor together, joining colleagues at a central table. I watched as she gazed at him with the same fervor she once reserved for me, though it had been some time since I'd seen that look. The revulsion inside me only grew. All I could think was that the eruption was imminent. The pressure was building, but I just had to hold on a little longer. I grappled with the conflict between my current feelings of fear, hatred, and resentment towards the scene unfolding before me, and the love, respect, and trust I once held for my beloved wife. It was a battle I found myself losing, despite my efforts to overcome these emotions. Now I was sinking into despair and self-pity, bowing my head in defeat. Over the past months, I had exerted immense effort to win her back and mend the fractures in our marriage. I meticulously planned date nights, attended to household chores, switched off the TV, and attempted to engage in conversation, only to have her walk away. I left flowers, heartfelt notes, and love-filled cards, only to discover them discarded in the trash. Even sending flowers to her workplace yielded no response. What more could I do but wait, I wondered to myself. Pushing these distressing thoughts aside, I made my way back to the makeshift bar nestled in the corner of the room. Standing behind Marianne, an acquaintance of my wife's from her previous workplace, I asked, striving to appear nonchalant, "Having a good time?" "I always enjoy these yearly gatherings." "Harold sure does love those free drinks," she responded. I offered a smile and nodded, lifting my empty glass. "Me too. By the way, I haven't spotted Jason's wife around. Any idea where she might be?" I hoped my anxiety didn't betray me. "She always dresses so elegantly and is delightful to converse with." "Oh, didn't Kel mention that today Jason served her with divorce papers?" "I guess she was neglecting her marital responsibilities," Marianne blurted out, her words lacking much filter as she reached a certain level of intoxication. I found her lack of restraint rather fitting. "No, I don't think so, especially since it's Friday night and all. We came straight here after I finished work, and there wasn't any time for gossiping." I didn't just stretch the truth, it was a blatant lie. We even took the afternoon off to prepare for tonight. She had plenty of opportunity to bring it up, but she chose not to, I replied, refilling my Captain and diet and fetching a glass of white wine for Kelsey before making my way over to where she and Jason were standing. They were so engrossed in each other that they didn't notice my approach. "Kel, I brought you a glass of wine," I said, handing her the drink. She jumped slightly at the sound of my voice. "Oh, you startled me," she exclaimed, taking the glass. "Thank you, dear." The rest of us felt increasingly uneasy the longer we lingered. Most people suddenly found the tablecloth quite captivating or discovered something fascinating across the room, avoiding direct eye contact. Others stared, likely pondering my thoughts and how oblivious I appeared. A younger guy, approximately 25 years old, even flashed a grin when he noticed me eyeing the table. We locked gazes for a moment before his smile faded and he too suddenly found the tablecloth fascinating. Approaching 1 in the morning, many guests had already departed from the hotel hall heading home. However, it was evident that Kelsey wasn't quite ready to part ways with her dance partner. "We should probably head home, honey. I still need to drop off the babysitter, and we promised we wouldn't keep her past 2 tonight," I mentioned, realizing I was intruding on her time with Jason. "Sure, okay. I think it's time for us to leave. See you on Monday," she said with a smile. Relief washed over all of us as the awkwardness neared its end. "Jason, it was nice seeing you," I added, extending my hand for a shake, which he returned. He had a firm grip, evidently trying to assert his strength. Standing 3 inches taller than my 6 feet, he outweighed me by about 15 pounds, and I noticed a slight punch on my stomach, pressing a bit firmer than usual. I met his gaze, sensing deceit and self-righteousness in his eyes. Eventually, he released my hand and bid us good night. I waved to the remaining guests as we exited the room and headed to the car. We remained silent during the drive home, although Kelsey wore a radiant smile. Upon arriving home, Kelsey checked on Caitlin, our 9-year-old daughter, while I settled up with Brittany and prepared to take her home. Upon my return, I headed to the bedroom to find Kelsey already asleep in bed. After checking on Caitlin, I visited the bathroom before retiring to the spare room for the night. I knew any possibility of closeness between us was out of the question tonight. As I struggled to recall the last time we had been carnal, with my eyes closing, the ceiling was the last thing I saw before slipping into a restless sleep. Rising early on Saturday morning, I mentally went through my checklist for the day. Caitlin was already in the living room, engrossed in her shows, and I offered a slight wave from the doorway. "Have you had breakfast yet?" I inquired. "Yep," she confirmed, waving a spoon dripping with milk, splattering drops onto the carpet. "All right, settle down. Mom's still sleeping and I need to get to work in my office," I reminded her. "Got it, Dad," she replied with unnecessary volume, causing me to chuckle. Around 8:30, I dialed my lawyer's cell phone, knowing he often worked from home on Saturday mornings. "Good morning, Bill. It's Matthew Franks," I greeted. "Morning, Matt. I'm guessing this isn't a cheery call," he responded, already anticipating the nature of the conversation. "You got it. It's time to set the plan in motion. I've learned that Jason served his wife yesterday. Any word if Kelsey has consulted with a lawyer yet?" "I don't think so, but I'll double-check. Let's meet at the coffee shop in half an hour. Make sure to sign and date the forms with my assistant for notarized paperwork first thing Monday morning and serve her at lunch," Bill outlined the plan. "Sounds good to me. See you soon," I confirmed before ending the call. Arriving early at the coffee shop, I offered a faint smile to the person behind the counter before collecting my order and settling into a cozy chair by the fireplace, lost in thought. I never imagined I'd be divorcing the one true love of my life. It's challenging to pinpoint the exact moment when you realize your comfortable life is unraveling. For me, it was triggered by a traffic ticket, one of those automatic camera checks for running a red light. When the notice arrived in the mail, I chuckled, instantly recognizing it as Kelsey's doing. She always flipped on her headlights when in a rush. I opened the envelope, deciding to silently shed tears instead of speaking. It seemed futile to confront this directly. The photo depicted Kelsey with a man's shoulder and arm visible beside her. Though his face wasn't visible, I knew who it was. Nothing seemed particularly suspicious. She could have been at lunch or a meeting. I checked the date, March 5th, and something about it bothered me. Recalling our text messages, I remembered plans to stop by Mary's after work to pick up clothes for Kate. At the time, it didn't strike me as unusual. Despite my suspicions, I dismissed them, attributing it to Mary's usual generosity. Checking the intersection on Google Maps revealed it was on the opposite end of town from Mary's residence. Still, I tried to convince myself it could be innocent. However, as I pieced together events since late November, doubts grew. Kelsey had kept a low profile, and holiday arguments became commonplace. By January, affection dwindled, and our conversations revolved around work or Caitlin. We no longer discussed our dreams, family vacations, or our future together. Since childhood, I've had a trust fund. Initially, my great-grandfather purchased undeveloped land in the Pacific Northwest, selling portions as the local town expanded. Upon his passing, I inherited proceeds from these sales, boosting the fund. Following my grandfather's passing, it grew once more. Thankfully, my family's self-sufficiency meant I never had to dip into it. The balance stabilized and even grew slightly through accrued interest. Upon my father's demise, with my mother also deceased, I inherited all family property, merging it with my trust. With our accumulated wealth, we were on the verge of settling for life. However, Kelsey and I continued to work and increase our net worth in anticipation of retirement. I obtained a prenuptial agreement to safeguard the fund. Throughout our marriage, Kelsey and I regularly updated our prenup and wills. One clause that remained unchanged was the standard divorce clause delineating asset ownership. We also included a provision for Caitlin's education in case of my passing or divorce, with specific conditions regarding the circumstances. To ensure preparedness, I maintained access to legal and accounting services. Seeking advice, I reached out to my lawyer for a referral to the best local divorce attorney, scheduling a consultation later in the week to explore my options. Given our sturdy prenup, he remained unworried about potential financial concerns. I clarified that while I wasn't ready to take drastic action yet, I sought guidance on the next steps. "Well, Matt, one option is to hire a private investigator to delve into the situation and ascertain if there's cause for concern. Unfortunately, all my PIs are currently tied up with other cases. It'll be several weeks before they can prioritize yours. But I'm not keen on waiting. This is already keeping me up at night. Are there any other avenues we could explore?"
There is one possibility, albeit a somewhat dubious one.
He's trying to turn over a new leaf, but he's not exactly the most trustworthy character. We affectionately refer to him as Larry the Rogue, Bill elaborated. He's a former cop who got the boot due to complaints and some shady dealings. He could get started immediately, but I'm hesitant to recommend a long-term partnership with him. Why the nickname? I inquired with a chuckle. I want to ensure everything is above board, so if we uncover anything, we're on solid legal footing if we need to proceed. That's fine. Is he legit? I understand he has a knack for obtaining evidence, such as detailed photos, videos, emails, and phone conversations that, let's say, tread the fine line of what's admissible in court. But I've heard his findings are ultimately conclusive proof of infidelity, one way or another. All right. As long as it's within legal bounds, we can settle with him for now and transition to a more reputable private investigator in a couple of weeks, I mused. Pausing, I added, do you reckon he can kick things off today? I'll give him a call and find out. I'll keep you posted. Here in the office? Sound good. I handled a stack of paperwork for both the lawyer and the dubious investigator, facilitated his connection with my accountant, and kept the retainer fee separate from my personal account to ensure Kelsey remained unaware of my actions. I didn't want to alarm her, especially if this turmoil in our marriage was just a passing phase. Meanwhile, amidst these proceedings, I endeavored to mend my relationship with my wife. Life had taught me that significant changes and out-of-character actions usually have underlying causes. Uncertain about what drove my wife's behavior and whether we were beyond reconciliation, I resolved to fulfill my husbandly duties. Taking matters into my own hands, I showered her with affection and aimed to become the epitome of a loving and supportive husband. Yet my efforts were met with rejection at every turn, signaling that we may have reached an irreversible breaking point. One Thursday afternoon, I was summoned to my lawyer's office to review the findings unearthed by the rogue investigator. I was presented with hours of footage capturing their liaison, carnal encounters, and apparent bliss as a couple, accompanied by photographs, call logs, and personal correspondence. The evidence left me both impressed and repulsed by the rogue's methods, affirming the appropriateness of his moniker. I sat there devastated. The idea of Kelsey having an affair with Jason Stanton was inconceivable to me. I could see the appeal of Jason, tall, handsome, and well-built with a promising career trajectory. Taking charge of Kelsey's department as her personal assistant about a year ago, he had ample opportunity to integrate into her life. A former college baseball star, sidelined by a shoulder injury in his senior year, Jason's achievements were impressive. But I never imagined Kelsey allowing him to wedge between us. The weight of it all was crushing. I struggled to breathe. My chest constricted, my vision blurred, and I felt lightheaded. Pushing my chair back, I leaned forward, trying to steady my breath. Inhaling and exhaling deeply, I fought to regain clarity of mind. The sense of loss and emptiness was indescribable. I had lost my confidant, my partner, my lover, and the mother of my child. In that moment, I saw no way forward. Then it worsened. He played back the recording from the day before, revealing why he had gathered us all together. "Really, do you love me?" Her voice was tinged with excitement. "Yes, my dear. You're perfect. I love you and want us to be a family." "You mean you, me, and Caitlin?" "Exactly." "What about Matt and Shannon?" "We'll divorce them. You'll have Caitlin, and we'll be happy together." A stunned silence followed as Kelsey processed the bombshell her lover had dropped. "You really love me, Kel?" "Yes, absolutely. I hadn't really considered leaving Matt." "Consider it for a moment. He can't offer you what I can. You'll be the belle of every ball, part of the elite. You'll experience places and luxuries he could only dream of." I detected the disdain in his tone, picturing the disdainful expression on his face. Losing Kate would devastate him. We're his world. I'll be a far better father than he could ever be. In a year, she won't even want to visit him. "Why do you despise him so much? What has he done to you?" Her voice held a touch of concern. Truthfully, I wondered the same. "He's not worthy of you, Kelsey. He lacks ambition, content to remain stagnant. He's just a cog enriching someone else. Did you know he's a plant manager? His facility employs 400 people, boasting the highest production and revenue per square foot." I felt a twinge of pride that Kelsey was aware, though I would have preferred this discussion in their own dining room rather than a hotel room. "He's weak, a beta without drive or ambition. Never even pursued an MBA. He's served his purpose, honey. I could easily crush him any day of the week." "Jason, don't assume you're superior to Matt. He's not weak. You don't know his backstory. He associated with rough crowds and is skilled with firearms. He nearly took a dark path but chose education. That's why he delayed college after high school." Now she seemed to boast. He's stronger and tougher than you realize. Promise me you won't resort to violence. I don't want either of you getting hurt, Matt for Kate's sake, and you for mine. But I'm not. I'm in love with him. I wished it were true, but you replaced him as my man, my love. She paused, pondering. How will it work when we divorce them simultaneously? I need to prepare before serving Shannon. Given her mental health issues and our year-long celibacy, it shouldn't be challenging. I'll split everything 50-50. She's unlikely to object. Okay, but you must file for Shannon before I consult a lawyer. She was resolute. It seemed she aimed to ensure her stability and not risk her comfortable life, even for her true love's sake. Come here, woman. I motioned, requesting the recording be turned off. At this juncture, listening was unnecessary. I glanced at Bill, grappling with how to handle this. You strike first, Matt. But what if she changes her mind? They rarely do that, Mr. Franks, he remarked solemnly. I'm afraid they've reached a point where nothing you do or say will sway them, Bill added. I observed the scoundrel closely for the first time. He appeared to be in his 30s, fit, and his suit was impeccably tailored, quite unlike my preconceptions. Respectful and seemingly insightful, I began to view him. More as Larry than the scoundrel. It seemed he genuinely cared, despite being paid for his services. Would you still want her after knowing all this? Larry inquired, echoing Bill's sentiments. You're probably right, Larry, I acknowledged. Turning to Bill, give me a day or two to decide, and I'll be in touch. All right, sounds good, Matt. Shall we draft the documents now and finalize details later or halt the process if needed? Bill proposed. Yes, let's proceed that way, I agreed. Larry handed me his business card as we concluded. Here's my personal number, Mr. Franks, in case you ever need me. Please, Larry, call me Matt, I insisted. Thank you. Matt, if you decide to pursue revenge, I know some people who could assist. After all, they don't call me Larry the Dastard for nothing, he remarked with a grin. Appreciative but uncertain, I responded. Nice meeting you, Larry. I'll reach out if I need assistance, though I doubt I could go through with it against Kel. It's reassuring to know I have support if I choose that path. With a smile, Larry bid farewell and departed in his car. Throughout the weekend, I grappled with my decision, struggling to focus on anything else. It seemed Kelsey was oblivious to the gravity of the situation, having already decided our family's fate. Doubt, anger, fear, and disappointment consumed me, particularly the loss of my identity and family. Caitlin's future weighed heavily on my mind, aggravated by the thought of this arrogant man raising her. Emotions ran rampant, leaving me in a fog of confusion until Sunday morning when clarity dawned. Sitting on the back porch with a pounding headache, it dawned on me that this fate was inevitable, regardless of my resistance. I'd already lost my wife and family, now it was a matter of how and on whose terms. The saying, lead, follow, or get the hell out of the way resonated with me. I refused to step aside or follow these schemers. There was only one option left, to lead. On Monday morning, I phoned Bill. Bill, it's Matt Franks calling. Good morning, Matt. Any progress on finding a solution? Yes, I'd like you to complete all the necessary paperwork, including only the legal photos Larry obtained. Split everything evenly. I hesitated. Do you think we should sell the house? Yes. We used a low-interest loan from my trust to purchase it, so essentially we've been paying ourselves all along. We'll divide any proceeds from the sale, but I'll repay the full loan amount and the accumulated interest. Also, please allocate $200,000 from my trust to Kel as a considerate payment for her services. It might soften her stance if she knows she won't be left destitute. I'm seeking primary custody of Kate. I understand it won't be simple, but perhaps Larry can uncover some damning information about Jason that diminishes his suitability as a father figure. I've heard he was quite the fraternity standout in college. Maybe he got carried away with some of his exploits. Please have Larry investigate. I have a contingency plan for Kate if primary custody isn't granted. Draft the most generous shared custody arrangement imaginable for me. I paused to allow Bill to catch up. Additionally, I intend to file a lawsuit against Jason for alienation of love and affection. I want to involve his wife Shannon in this ordeal as well, ensuring she's fully informed of the situation within legal bounds. On that note, I'd like you to devise another infidelity divorce plan for her. I'll cover the expenses while we serve them both. In the exclusion room, it's unlikely to yield significant results. I'll also need Shannon to sign a contract with me. I can start drafting the forms, but without her consent or details, I'm unable to proceed further, Bill clarified. I see what you're aiming for. It's about stirring the pot a bit. And while we're at it, I want to sue Kelsey's employer for permitting her affair with her boss. While there may not be a moral clause in their manual, It's dubious for any company to overlook such misconduct under supervision, especially given his position as her direct superior. It's doubtful this will go far, but let's rattle the cage and see what unfolds. Understood, Matt. This will incur substantial costs upfront and potentially escalate. We're looking at extensive manpower here, and if this escalates further, I want to ensure they don't profit unjustly. As my dad used to say, engaging a lawyer is essentially negotiating the price. Bill chuckled at my sarcastic remark about lawyers, remarking, "Your dad was a wise man indeed. Remember, you're not obligated to provide her any funds from your trust. Your prenuptial agreement is rock solid." "I understand, Bill, but after reflecting on it over the weekend, I've decided that if I don't leave her in financial straits, she might be more inclined to meet my terms. And truthfully, she deserves it. She put in hard work and supported me. We were both saving for our future together. I figured it might give her an edge over Jason, so she won't have to rely on him as much when she's on her own. She deserves better, but there's no way I'm giving that cheating scoundrel Jason more than he's already taken from me in life. I mean, my wife should have been enough." As I spoke, I felt a surge of anger, thinking about how Jason had seized the life that should have been mine. Despite the circumstances, I always strived to be fair in my relationships and wanted to ensure I treated Kelsey with fairness, even if she didn't reciprocate. My solace is knowing that Caitlin will understand my actions later on, when she sees how our family fell apart. Before I forget, Bill, hold off on any filings for now. I want everything prepared and ready to go, but I prefer to wait for her to make the initial move. This way, I'll have more time with Kate in our family home. I know there will come a point when I have to act, but I want to delay until the very last moment when I can't bear it any longer. Got it. We'll keep everything undated and notarized until you're ready. I work from home on Saturday morning, so feel free to call me then too. We can't file until Monday morning anyway, but I'll have someone ready to serve them as soon as the doors open. Okay, that's the plan. Goodbye for now. I retrieved Larry's business card from my pocket and dialed the number. "Larry, it's Matt Franks. How's it going?" "I'm good," he replied. "Are you ready for some dirty work?" "Well, kind of. But I need you to hold off until I give the green light." "No problem, Matt. What's the game plan?" "Can we meet up?" "Yes, give me an hour." "Sounds good," I responded. I was already waiting when he pulled into the parking lot. After grabbing some coffee and a snack, he sat across from me. "I want to gather all the damning evidence, photos, videos, recordings, everything. And we need to figure out a way to anonymously send it to Shannon Stanton, perhaps through email." "No problem. I know someone who operates on the dark web," Larry said, "and that's it. How about posting a video on a 30th site or sending nasty messages to Kelsey's parents or coworkers?" Man, he's devious, I thought. No, Kel still has to stay in town. I wouldn't want her so humiliated that she leaves town with Kate. And despite everything, I still love her, even if she doesn't love me anymore. I slid an envelope containing $5,000 in cash across the table. "This should help you get started, but let me know if you need more." Larry accepted the money and glanced at me. "I think $3,000 will suffice." He may be tough, but at least he's straightforward. Consider the rest as an advance. I might require your expertise later. Remember, stay on standby until I contact you. I want to catch them off guard, and I have my reasons for allowing them to make the first move. Oh, and we also need to gather information on his wife's health issues. Her medical background could impact our decisions down the line. Can you handle that? Absolutely, Larry replied. And Bill mentioned you were looking into Jason's college years. I'm hoping to uncover something useful if custody becomes a battle. Larry nodded, jotting down a few notes on his pad. After finishing our coffee and exchanging stories about his past experiences as a cop and people we might have known, we shook hands and parted ways. That was 3 months ago. My thoughts returned to the present as Bill arrived, followed shortly by his assistant and Larry. Ready to proceed? Bill inquired once we were all seated. Yes, it seems that way. Larry, do we have any indication if Kelsey has sought legal counsel? As far as I know, no, I replied. I quickly checked her email after Bill's call and didn't find anything. I'll take a closer look today, and should know by Monday morning. Larry grinned and gave me a knowing wink. And what about Jason? Any skeletons in his closet? I asked with a glimmer of hope. Well, he was under investigation during his time in the fraternity. Allegations involving date abduction medications and underage girls at parties, Larry revealed. I've received copies of everything and have already handed them over to Bill, I informed the group. Bill glanced up, confirming, I have them in case we need them for the custody hearing. Retrieving the documents we had been diligently working on for the past few months, he indicated where I needed to sign. After signing, Bill's assistant notarized them, and I turned to address the group. Larry, can you find out who Shannon Stanton has hired as her lawyer and inform Bill? Bill, if he's competent, could you share our legal file with him? What if he's not up to par? Bill inquired. Then we'll figure out a way to connect you with Shannon, but I prefer we handle it properly. Bill, can I collect the documents on Monday afternoon? I plan to hand the paperwork to Kelsey personally, first informing her of the situation, and then you can officially serve her on Tuesday. Bill nodded understandingly and conferred with his assistant about preparing the server for Tuesday. I believe we can begin reaching out to Shannon, since she'll likely be updated soon. Bill, you can share the file with Shannon's lawyer on Monday afternoon, provided it doesn't interfere with my discussion with Kelsey on Monday evening. I leaned back in my chair, exhaling deeply. Things should be fully underway by Wednesday. Matt, have you considered where Kelsey will stay on Monday night? Bill inquired suddenly. Would it be an issue for her to stay at the house for a few days? No, unless a restraining order is obtained and she consents. I wouldn't share a bed with her. Legally, it shouldn't be an issue, but it might make you uneasy. I'd worry about how a less scrupulous lawyer might exploit this information, Bill added. All right, I'll give her a week to find alternate accommodations. We're not carnal at the moment, so I don't foresee any issues. Oh, you mean sharing the same bed, but our documents grant me temporary control of the house and custody of Kate, right? Yes, until her attorney files a motion to overturn the arrangement or until we all reach a consensus. I meant actually sharing the same bed. It might give off an odd vibe, Bill explained. Don't worry, we're not sharing a bed currently. Hey Larry, what did you uncover about Shannon's health? She's been battling depression and bipolar disorder for years. Apparently, the medications have dampened her libido, so Mr. Wonderful went searching elsewhere. I'm not sure we want to know how you obtained this information, I remarked. Larry simply grinned and shook his head while Bill pretended to be shocked. Bill, does this have any relevance to our situation? I inquired. Not at the moment. It might become significant later when we address guardianship and determine living arrangements, Bill clarified. As Bill jotted down notes on his iPad, we conversed for a few more minutes before gradually concluding our strategy session and resuming our respective tasks for the day. I felt somewhat disheartened for the remainder of the weekend, weighed down by the impending responsibilities awaiting me on Monday. Kelsey remained oblivious to any changes, as expected. On Sunday, I arranged for my aunt to pick up Caitlin from school on Monday and care for her overnight, allowing me to discuss important family matters with Kelsey. They resided on a farm outside the city, and Caitlin enjoyed playing with their dogs and tending to the animals. She'd be taking Caitlin to school on Tuesday, and I've decided we'll break the news to Caitlin on Tuesday evening. I informed Caitlin about these arrangements, and while she was excited, she seemed a bit puzzled about why she had to wait until Tuesday. I simply explained that Mom and Dad needed some personal time to discuss everything. She reluctantly accepted it. I slept in the spare room again, and once more, Kelsey didn't mention it. She visibly sighed with relief when she saw me heading there before bed. As I lay there Sunday night running through my checklist and reviewing my plan, I eventually drifted off to sleep. On Monday morning, I contacted my VP of Operations and requested a week off. I also reached out to my assistant and senior production manager to provide them with any necessary details while I was away. Around 1 in the afternoon, I entered Bill's office and unexpectedly found Larry there. I noticed a stack of papers on the desk, and the bustling activity in the office indicated that everyone was occupied. Matt, we filed the paperwork at the courthouse this morning, and here are Kelsey's documents as you requested. We've arranged for the official filing at your home around 9 a.m. on Tuesday. Is that suitable? Bill inquired, handing me the envelopes. Yes, that should work. I'll try to persuade her to take the rest of the week off. I'll let you know if that changes, I responded. Great, that's settled. Bill paused momentarily to gather his thoughts before continuing. Larry found Shannon's lawyer, and he's quite competent, so I forwarded him our files, and he seemed quite eager. He might countersue for infidelity and aim for a larger share of their assets than just a 50-50 split. He assured me he won't take any action until tomorrow morning, so everything seems fine. Okay, gentlemen, are we forgetting anything? I inquired. Just a little update. It appears Kelsey has an appointment with her lawyer next week based on her calls and emails. And Matt, please don't hesitate to reach out if you need further assistance, Larry asked cautiously, earning another sharp glance from Bill regarding the ongoing situation. Great, sounds good, I responded, hoping I wouldn't have to delve any deeper into this mess. I guess it's all in Kelsey and Jason's hands now. Leaving Bill's office, I sent a text to Kelsey. Kel, will you be home by 5:30 tonight? Why, what's going on? She replied. Nothing serious. I was a bit preoccupied over the weekend and wanted to catch up tonight. I arranged for Aunt Alex to pick up Kate and keep her overnight. I thought I'd bring dinner home. Any requests? How thoughtful. Ready. I'll have dinner ready at 5:30. I felt guilty for setting her up like this, but it had become a common occurrence for me lately. I hoped she would interpret it as me making an extra effort to be affectionate. Kelsey arrived home around 5:15 and changed while I set the table and served the food. I poured us each a glass of wine and sat at the table, waiting for her. She took a long sip from her glass as she joined me. We shared the food and engaged in light conversation, and she seemed completely unaware of what was about to unfold. "What's your schedule like for the rest of the week?" I inquired after we finished eating, both of us freely picking at our favorite dishes. "Do you want to make plans?" she asked, glancing at me sideways. "No, I thought you might want to take a week off after we talk," I stated in a flat tone, trying to keep any emotion out of my voice. "Why should I do that?" "You'll understand, Kel," I said, placing the envelope on the table in front of her. She glanced at it and then back at me, taking another sip of wine. "I'm aware of Jason and your intentions to file for divorce," I stated bluntly. She coughed slightly, surprised, and stared at me with a blank expression. I could see her mind working, trying to comprehend how I found out and what action she could take to slow me down. "What scam?" she finally grasped, referring to the meeting with the lawyer next week and Jason's filing against Shannon. "I know you're in love with him and plan to take Kate and leave me." I opened the bag and slid some photos toward her. Her eyes widened as she set her glass down and picked up the photos, scanning through them. I noticed her eyes glistening and heard her start to hiccup slightly, a sign of her emotional distress. "I'm so sorry, Matthew. I never wanted any of this to happen." "I don't know what else to say," she murmured, her gaze fixed on the table. "I understand, Kel. I've been aware of your intentions for months now. I've had time to come to terms with it to some extent. It's incredibly disappointing and painful for me," I responded solemnly. I took a moment to compose myself, attempting to control my rising anger. "The only thing I need to know is if there's something I did or didn't do that pushed you toward Jason," I pressed. "Oh God, no," she exclaimed, meeting my gaze briefly before looking away. "I think it just happened out of guilt and shame. You didn't do anything. You were a wonderful husband and father. I just fell for him," she confessed, her voice breaking. I felt a mix of disappointment and relief. It seemed there was nothing I could do. If she had simply fallen out of love with me and chosen Jason, he had evidently taken enough time to win her over and push me out, leaving me powerless to stop it. Our marriage had reached its end, and all that remained was paperwork. I presented the terms of the divorce and handed them to her. "Here's the proposed agreement. I've already filed my application, so you won't need to do that if you agree to my terms. The main points include upholding the prenuptial agreement, meaning my trust is off the table. I'm offering to sell off our joint assets and split them equally, including the house. Since I filed first, I'm requesting full custody of Caitlin and minimal child support. Of course, you'll have a flexible visitation schedule. I'll keep her on my insurance, but you'll need to arrange for your own. You can keep your 401k and any investments from the marriage, as well as the inheritance from your mom. I don't want to take what's rightfully yours. We'll divide the investments we made together. Kate and I will remain in the house until it's sold. Additionally, I'm providing $200,000 from my trust to help you get settled. I suggest you create a prenuptial agreement to safeguard your assets if you proceed with Jason. I want to ensure you're self-sufficient, so I'm not asking for spousal support." I paused to let her process what I'd outlined. "I think I should have custody of Caitlin. She'll need her mother as she grows up," she asserted. "I wholeheartedly agree, but you can be involved through visits and calls. Frankly, I don't trust Jason with our daughter. I know he plans to win her over with gifts and charm. Since he couldn't have his own child, he wants mine. I'm already generous in letting him have you, but he won't have our daughter. I understand you'll want to discuss custody further. Let's let the lawyers handle it and try to keep it civil." I offered custody as a peace offering after seeing Kate's reaction during her discussion with Jason. He wouldn't damage her, but that's for you to decide. Separating her from her mother isn't the solution. For now, she'll stay with me until we find a better arrangement. You can stay in the master bedroom for a few nights, or a week, while you figure things out. Kelsey, my love for you hasn't wavered. I envisioned us conquering the world together, but your actions are tearing me apart and I'm at a loss. My world feels like it's crumbling, and I'm striving to handle this with fairness and kindness. I genuinely don't want to inflict the pain on you that I'm feeling. But trust me, if you escalate things or let Jason meddle, I won't hesitate to respond in kind. And dear, I have resources at my disposal that neither of you possess. My demeanor shifted, and she could sense the frustration in my voice. I can play hardball if pushed. You've seen this side of me before, so please. Let's keep this conflict at a manageable level and allow the lawyers to navigate it. I truly want to maintain civility and respect in our interactions. It's crucial for Caitlin to see us being civil. I envision both of us playing active roles in our daughter's life. I implore you, I don't want our situation to devolve into a prolonged, bitter battle. I'm available until the end of the week, and according to legal protocol, you must be formally served, which is set to happen here at the house at 9:00 a.m. I didn't want to put you in an awkward spot at work, so you may want to consider taking a few days off as well. I know it'll be tough for both of us to share the same space, but I thought perhaps we could sit down with Caitlin tomorrow night or keep her home on Wednesday to explain the situation. What are your thoughts? Kelsey had lost her appetite and appeared visibly unwell, perhaps realizing the gravity of her actions. She had no one to blame but herself. I was content and oblivious until she disrupted it all. She glanced at me, looking bewildered, and conceded. Matt, you clearly had a plan and outmaneuvered us. I'm not sure how, but you did. I'll notify work first thing and be home until Wednesday at least. Do you think Aunt Alex can keep Caitlin tomorrow night too? Maybe we'll keep her home from school tomorrow and bring her back Wednesday morning so we can talk. My investigator, Larry, uncovered everything after I sensed something was amiss. I'll call Aunt Alex right away. It seems like a good idea. Kelsey gave a subtle nod when I mentioned Larry. While she gathered some papers, I bid her good night and assumed she needed time alone to process. I watched as she retreated to the master bedroom, locking the door, which didn't bother me, as I had already moved most of my belongings to the spare room. I phoned my aunt, explaining the family situation, and she agreed to keep Caitlin an extra night, dropping her off Wednesday morning. I also informed Caitlin, who was puzzled but accepting. I assured her that her mom and I would explain everything on Wednesday. As I tidied up and prepared for bed, I heard Kelsey murmuring on the phone behind the closed door, followed by quiet sobs as she mourned our broken marriage. Early the next morning, I heard Kelsey downstairs getting ready for work. At precisely 9 a.m., she accepted the package, excluding the sensitive materials. Shortly after, she grabbed her belongings and left without specifying her destination, presumably to meet Jason, her lawyer, or someone else sympathetic to her plight. Later in the day, Bill called to update me that both Jason and their company had received our legal claims. Surprisingly, Shannon had also countersued Jason around the same time. Bill stressed the importance of remaining vigilant, as Jason had apparently made threats against me. Although I never anticipated Jason acting recklessly, given his gains, I took precautions. I retrieved my .45 ACP from the weapons safe, ensured it was loaded, cocked and locked, then placed it on the chair while I watched TV. A few hours later, while standing at the sink, I spotted a black BMW pulling into my driveway, with an enraged Jason jumping out and retrieving a baseball bat from the back. Sensing danger, I hurried back to my chair, where my cell phone was, and dialed emergency. Feeling safer with the door locked, I reported to the operator that my wife's boyfriend was in the driveway with a baseball bat. As I heard a second car pull up outside, accompanied by screams and voices indicating Kelsey's presence, a high-pitched screech pierced the air. I jumped as my front door shattered from the impact, and Jason burst inside, screaming threats at the top of his lungs. With my hand on the pistol grip, I remained calm. Jason swung the bat wildly as Kelsey screamed outside, pleading with him to stop. "I took your wife, and now I will eliminate you and take your daughter too," he yelled furiously. I allowed him to advance another 5 feet before drawing my weapon. His narrowed eyes indicated poor judgment. Although his bat was raised above his head, it seemed unlikely to be effective at a distance of 25 feet. The weapon shot from the chamber was deafening. I was trained to aim for my targets 3 times, relying on instinct. The second shot followed a split second after the first. Jason slowed down, perhaps due to momentum, and stumbled. By the time the third round was fired, though I noticed movement at the door, I remained focused on my task. The bullet pierced the splintered front door, narrowly missing Kelsey's head. She escaped without injury. Jason fell to his knees before collapsing on his stomach. The area echoed with screams, and the weapon shot seemed louder than expected. Sirens wailed as responding officers approached. Unsure of the situation's severity, they placed Kelsey on her stomach and handcuffed her by the open door, her cries continuing. Shocked by the unfolding events, I finally noticed the weapon aimed at me and the officer commanding, "Stop! Drop the weapon!" Coming to my senses, I complied and followed his orders. The following 2 weeks were a whirlwind of chaos and stress. Jason was declared dead at the scene. Later, I found out through police reports and eyewitnesses that he received both my lawsuit and updated divorce papers from his wife simultaneously. It didn't take him long to figure out that the incriminating photos came from me. Kelsey stood beside him as he opened the envelope from his wife and confirmed that she too had a set of those photographs. Shortly after, they were summoned to the vice president's office where they confessed to their affair, unaware of the consequences. Realizing that my lawsuit against the company would likely fail, the management decided to terminate the managing director for engaging in an inappropriate relationship with a subordinate, which they promptly did. In Jason's eyes, I became the embodiment of evil, and he believed I deserved punishment for thwarting his plans. Grabbing one of his souvenir bats from the office, he set off for my house. Kelsey spotted him through the conference room window on the second floor and guessed his destination. She intercepted him in our driveway, attempting to calm him down before any injury was done to me. Unbeknownst to them, I had been forewarned of their arrival and was prepared. Kelsey ended up with a black eye when Jason struck her while she tried to prevent him from entering. Other than that, she sustained no further injuries but endured months of nightmares amidst police interrogations, legal proceedings, and courtroom appearances. I spoke with her briefly, but we never delved into a deep discussion about the events that transpired in our home. Kelsey was a mere shadow of her former self, having lost her husband, lover, and daughter in less than 24 hours. She never fully recovered. Kelsey remained in touch throughout the divorce proceedings and perhaps for about a month after its conclusion. Surprisingly, she never enlisted a lawyer or contested the divorce, allowing me to easily secure custody of Caitlin. However, to my surprise, she never fulfilled her part of the financial settlement. Bill held onto it for her, but eventually returned it to me a year later. She never returned to our home and instead stayed with family until she vanished. Despite a few supervised visits with Caitlin, they were often awkward or unproductive. Regardless, I ensured Caitlin was available for every scheduled visit, whether confirmed attendance or not. She showed up roughly every fourth visit. I learned that Kelsey had developed a dependency on painkillers and other prescribed medications to manage her mental well-being. By the time she disappeared, she was unemployed, isolated, and destitute. Neither Caitlin nor I nor anyone she knew had any means of contacting her, and she ceased all communication with us. We were left without a wife and mother. Eventually, we sold the house and purchased another in Caitlin's school district, striving to rebuild our lives. Both Caitlin and I sought counseling to cope with the trauma. While I attended for 6 months, I eventually had to suppress the pain and move forward. I had a daughter to care for and a life to lead. Caitlin underwent counseling for several years intermittently, largely due to her response to the divorce and Kelsey's disappearance. She grappled with numerous psychological challenges. It took me 3 years to gather my bearings enough to consider dating again. A few months later, I encountered a remarkable woman named Jo, who was compassionate and understanding regarding Caitlin's and my circumstances. Our courtship progressed much slower and longer than either of us desired, but eventually evolved into a physical relationship, leading to marriage roughly 16 months later. Jo and I nurtured Caitlin as our own daughter but opted not to expand our family further. Over time, our lives stabilized and flourished. Our only hurdles centered around significant milestones in Caitlin's life, such as her high school and college graduations. I enlisted Larry's help multiple times in attempts to locate Kelsey, yet every lead proved fruitless. The prevailing belief was that she likely met an unfortunate demise in solitude and despair. It was a harrowing ordeal, but we persevered as best we could and moved forward. I was grateful for the opportunity to devise a strategy and enlist the right assistance to implement it effectively.
Story 2.
I'm a 28-year-old guy, and I recently discovered that my 28-year-old wife had an affair with her former boss, a 35-year-old married guy with kids. We've been married for 5 years, and we were each other's first everything since we were high school sweethearts and even grew up as neighbors. Despite both coming from broken homes, we thought we created something different than what we saw growing up. However, now I'm questioning if I was naive this whole time. I work remotely, but my wife went back to in-person work. She works in a field with few women, often feeling like her job is a boys' club. Her affair partner, who was her supervisor at the time, was supposedly one of the good ones, looking out for her at work. Recently, she got promoted to a supervisor role herself, which came with new responsibilities, including occasional business trips. Last week, she went on her first trip from Wednesday through Friday. Before she left, we shared encouraging words. On Monday, she came home early, looking overwhelmed with a red mark on her cheek. She bruises easily due to her fair skin. When I asked what happened, she just wanted a hug. After hugging her, she confessed to an incident at work that completely shattered my world. She had closeness with her former supervisor during the business trip. I couldn't comprehend it at first. It felt like a cruel joke or a revelation happening to someone else. I stayed silent during her confession, shocked and unable to say a word. Cheating is a touchy subject for me, just like it is for many people. My own family fell apart because of my dad's affair. I caught him cheating and told my mom. Unfortunately, my relationship with my dad is now strained because he blames me for breaking up the family, and he's never forgiven me. My wife witnessed the pain cheating caused in my family, comforting me when we were teens. Now, she's the one who's hurt me by doing the same thing to us. Apparently, the man's wife discovered the affair and confronted both him and my wife at their workplace. It turned into a big scene with employees and customers around. The woman insulted my wife, calling her names and even slapped her. Other employees got involved, and the woman was escorted out of the building. Later, my wife called her older sister, who scolded her and insisted she confess to me about the affair. I still couldn't find the words, but my wife pleaded with me to say something. All I managed to ask was for her to explain what happened on the trip. She shared that on the second day, she went for drinks with other team leads for team bonding. As the night progressed, it ended up being just her and her former supervisor. He made inappropriate comments, kissed her, and things escalated to closeness. I couldn't handle more details, so I stood up, telling her to stop. When she reached for my hand, I moved away, asking her not to touch me. She broke down, apologizing and begging for forgiveness, claiming it was a huge mistake fueled by drinks. Despite her repeated declarations of love, I told her she needed to leave and call her sister to pick her up. She stood up from the couch, crying even more, and tried to hug me, but I moved away again. She pleaded with me not to end things, promising to quit her job and give me full access to her phone, suggesting we do counseling. I couldn't hold it together. I told her that if she wasn't leaving the house, then I would. Without stopping to pack, I went straight for the door. She grabbed my arm, seemingly trying to stop me, and kept begging, saying this can't be the end after everything we've been through. Despite everything, leaving her behind while she was crying tore me apart. It's because I love her, more than I ever thought possible to love someone else. But she broke me, tossing away our entire life and future. I ended up at my mom's house, where I'm staying now. Somehow, I kept my composure during the drive, but when I arrived, I just cried. I don't think my mom has ever seen me cry as a teen or an adult. The only person who's ever seen me cry is my wife. I told my mom what happened because I didn't know how to keep it from her, showing up like that. She was heartbroken. She and my wife always got along, and my mom treated her like a daughter. That was their relationship. She didn't pass judgment, but said I could stay as long as needed and tried to offer some words of comfort. Since I left, my wife has been puff up my phone with calls and texts, but I haven't responded. The texts have mostly been begging me to come home, talk with her, asking where I am, and pleading not to give up on us. I feel so broken. I thought I knew what this pain was like, but experiencing it is different. I never thought my wife would do something like this. I always believed cheating meant the end of a relationship, but now I'm considering giving our relationship another chance, going to counseling together to salvage it. I keep thinking about our history, how much I love her, how we always felt like matching puzzle pieces, and how she was there when I thought I had no one. I don't know what to do or how to proceed. I'm at a loss. Update. This week has been incredibly painful. I feel like a helpless child again, witnessing my world crumble without my wife, who has always been my best friend and support. I was certain I didn't know the whole story, so yesterday I decided to reach out to the other betrayed spouse. I needed to hear her perspective for clarity, as she wouldn't have any reason to lie or withhold information. I found her Facebook account and messaged her on Messenger. She responded in less than 10 minutes and suggested a video call right away. I immediately agreed. Without saying a word, one look told me she was going through a similar hell. She mentioned that shortly after being escorted out of the workplace last Monday, she tried to contact me but couldn't find my details. One of the last things she said to my wife was a threat to tell me. As she said this, all I could think about was how my wife rushed home that day, and her sister told her that I needed to hear about the affair from her. I asked her if she knew more about what happened during the team lead trip, or if it was just a one-night stand and how she found out. What she told me confirmed my fears. The affair dates back to before the trip, with documented proof of intense emotional texts. All of this was shared with me through screen share, and it was tough to keep it together. She told me that back in January, she noticed her husband acting withdrawn and disinterested toward her. There were times she saw him texting my wife, which he brushed off as work-related. The day before the trip, she went to the job to drop something off her significant other had forgotten and found him in his office with my wife standing close together, joking and smiling. The whole atmosphere between them felt flirty. When they noticed her, they parted, and my wife's face looked panicked while her husband went over it all together. She felt certain something was going on, but didn't address it, wanting undeniable proof her husband couldn't escape from. After the trip, her significant other was more distant and dismissive. That night, she waited until he fell asleep and checked his phone, finding bosom texts between him and my wife. Before the trip, it started as emotional cheating, with the affair partner stating he couldn't focus at work whenever my wife was around. In these texts, it was clear the affair partner was the pursuer and aggressor toward my wife, but that doesn't really make a difference because she never shut down his advances. Some pre-trip texts involved the affair partner bashing his wife and going off about repeated collapses. It was just plain disgusting how he talked about her to my wife. He kept mentioning how maybe he needed a woman like my wife. There were texts from last Thursday night, with the affair partner inviting my wife to join the team for drinks, and texts the affair partner sent to my wife the following morning, revealing that they had closeness. At this point, there were no more replies from my wife after Thursday night. I didn't think it was possible for me to hurt any worse, but here I am. The other betrayed spouse said it took everything to stay calm, not wanting to wake her twin sleeping in the other room. She didn't wake her husband up or confront him immediately. She was done with him in her heart, feeling he had crossed a line he couldn't come back from. She was angrier than ever during their marriage, set on humiliating him like he had humiliated her. She faked her smiles, acted like everything was fine, and waited until Monday to expose him at work in front of peers, underlings, and customers. This confrontation had been brewing for a while. It was only a coincidence that my wife was at work that day. When the other betrayed spouse saw my wife with the affair partner and another employee, she decided to target my wife too. My wife tried unsuccessfully to get her to quiet down. The other betrayed spouse then said her husband showed no signs of remorse, only anger at her public outburst. I learned from her that the affair partner was fired the following day. After the confrontation, she also kicked him out of the house, saying one of the hardest things in her life was having to explain all this to her twins. I had an idea of what she meant because I saw my own mom have to do the same thing after my dad. She mentioned this whole ordeal revealed who her husband truly was, and despite her husband pursuing my wife, she believed my wife still had a role in the affair. As a woman, she expressed having no sympathy or respect for my wife. I assured her I didn't fault her for feeling that way, and she had every right to hold her perspective. Surprisingly, she apologized to me for her husband's involvement in the affair. I was momentarily speechless, and then apologized for my wife's part. She mentioned we were now part of a club we never wanted to be in, one our significant others forced us into. She inquired about my wife and me. I honestly admitted I didn't know what I was going to do, but clarified that I wasn't currently staying with my wife. We exchanged good wishes, and before ending the call, we shared numbers in case we wanted to talk again. Every raw emotion was heightened during our conversation. I opened up to my mom about what I learned, and she refrained from expressing judgment. However, I sensed her disappointment in my wife. Part of me feels a strange satisfaction that her partner is losing everything, his job and family, and perhaps he's suffering. Yet, I'm not proud of that feeling, as a wife is losing her husband, and kids are facing immense pain. I also harbor anger toward my wife for betraying us, breaking our vows, and jeopardizing my health. We had closeness after her return from the trip, and the post-trip texts suggest no protection was used. I realize I should reconnect with my wife regarding the information from other betrayed spouses and demand a timeline. However, I feel even more lost than when I made the original post. It feels like I'm drowning. I suspected this might be the case, that in a moment where she could have disclosed the whole truth to salvage anything, she still chose to lie to you. I'm sorry. Update. I reached out to my wife, breaking the no-contact rule after finding out about her affair with a coworker. There have been comments and messages that are hard to see, but I believe they're necessary and come from a good place. It's been a week since the discovery, and I've been trying to process everything after talking with the other betrayed spouse. Sleep has been elusive, knowing my wife, my friend since childhood, had an affair. Stepping outside, I feel like an empty shell, thinking people may secretly be laughing at me. Has anyone else felt this way? I decided to break no contact to request a timeline. The plan was to go unannounced on Sunday, giving her another chance to be truthful. Some mentioned the affair partner might be at our home. It was painful to consider that she could be defiling the home we shared for most of our adult lives, but after everything, it wasn't far-fetched. I texted the other betrayed spouse for a description of the affair partner's car and explained why I needed it. After receiving the info, I drove back and looked for the affair partner's car, but it wasn't around. I went into the house to find my wayward wife alone on the couch. She was stunned to see me, with red, puffy eyes, like she'd been crying. I hated seeing her this way and had an urge to comfort her, but I recalled how we got here in the first place. It was confusing, almost not acting to help her. My wayward wife called my name with relief and moved toward me, but I asked her to stop. She did, then said she'd been worried about me and thanked me for coming back home. I asked if the affair partner had been in the house. She said no, but I searched the house, and she followed after a while, promising that he was never here. I found nothing suggesting the affair partner had been there. I asked if she had any contact with him. She admitted he left a voicemail, but she didn't call back and blocked his number, providing proof. We sat at the dining room table to talk, and at this point, I tried not to get lost in emotion. I told her I would like her to answer my questions. She agreed and said she's glad I'm here, and we're talking again. I asked if she had quit, and she hadn't yet. But on the same day, the affair partner was fired. She was suspended for a week pending an investigation, and tomorrow she'll learn the outcome. She said the affair partner's firing was the sole reason she hadn't quit as she offered. I asked her to tell me about the affair. She said she already did, but I told her we both know there's more to the story, and now I'm giving her another chance to be honest. If I discover any lies, there would be no going back. She was quiet for a few moments, and then she nodded, revealing the extent of the affair, matching what the other betrayed spouse showed. She showed me the affair started emotionally, with some flirting at work, but she insisted they only had closeness once. While not going into every single detail the other betrayed spouse showed, she revealed the emotional affair. She didn't say anything I didn't already know, but it was like a fresh wound opened up. After hearing her confirm it, I was left in silence again, like how I was on D-Day. She asked me to please tell her what I was thinking. I asked her why she would do this, knowing my family's history. Was she unhappy in any way? She broke down crying, saying she has never been unhappy with me or our marriage, that she loves me, and our relationship is the most important thing to her. I said her actions speak louder. She said she doesn't know why she got involved in the affair, but never wanted to hurt me, and it damaging her that by the time they had closeness, she made so many mistakes and realized she was in too deep and didn't know how to pull herself out, especially when the affair partner had championed for her at work. She told me the affair was no failure on my part, it's all on her. I asked if she felt forced by the affair partner, to which she said everyone loved him, and there was a boys' club mentality, and she froze up during closeness. She kept saying sorry, and if she could take it all back, she would. My emotions were slipping, so I tried to speed it along and asked why she would have closeness with me, which she initiated. She only said she felt so disgusted and guilty that she wanted to wash it away by being with me again. I told her she didn't wash anything away. All she did was endanger me to ease her conscience. She didn't have a response. She only kept crying. I then questioned her if she ever intended to tell me. She admitted she wanted to confess but was afraid because she knew that cheating was a deal breaker for me. Her plan was to fix it by ending the affair and cutting off communication with the affair partner outside of work. She claimed she stopped texting him after they had closeness. I inquired if the affair partner wore a contraceptive, and she disclosed that closeness wasn't planned. Because she froze up, she didn't mention protection to the affair partner. She expressed deep remorse, acknowledging that she'll never forgive herself and understands my right to feel hatred. The pain she caused me and the no-contact period have deeply scared her. She pleaded with me to give our marriage another chance, but I compared her to my dad, and that hurt her deeply. Although she insisted she was nothing like him, I questioned the difference. When she tried to take my hand, I pulled away. She argued that our situation is different from my parents and begged me to believe we can overcome this given everything we've been through. I couldn't bring myself to say that. I then requested a timeline, which seemed to terrify her, but I insisted, and she agreed. I emphasized the need for both of us to get tested, and she agreed without hesitation. Struggling to keep my emotions in check, I packed a bag and some essentials. She pleaded for me to stay, willing to sleep on the couch, but I couldn't remain in the same house with her. She professed her love and apologized for everything, but I couldn't respond. When she asked where I was staying, I admitted it was with my mom. She wanted me to convey a message to my mom, but I declined, stating I couldn't be the go-between. I sensed her concern about her relationship with my mom, as she had treated her like a daughter. Despite her request for a hug, I refused and left. Now I'm assessing my options. While she revealed more truth, the reality remains unchanged. I'm uncertain about her claim that she froze up. I'm also hesitant to share the affair with others due to embarrassment. Currently, I'm taking it day by day and would appreciate any advice on how to proceed. The idea of freezing up seems unlikely to me. She still went through with it, and truthfully, they might have had closeness more than once. Doing so without protection feels uncomfortably bosom for a casual encounter. Am I mistaken? Update. I got the timeline from my wife, detailing her affair with her coworker. I've been maintaining casual contact with her. She texted about heading to a post-suspension meeting, and an hour later, she informed me of her termination. We discussed the STD test scheduled for Thursday. Last night, she FaceTimed me, and although I was hesitant to answer, she still looked the same as on Sunday. She mentioned finishing the timeline, and I told her I'd come over tomorrow. She expressed that writing the timeline was one of the hardest things she had done, second only to our current separation. She was trying not to cry, and although I would normally comfort her, I couldn't. My mom offered to accompany us for support. She wouldn't enter the house, just wait in the car, likely concerned about my drive back. I accepted her offer and drove us. My wife was waiting for me inside with a 2-page document, visibly anxious. I sat by her on the couch. It felt like D-Day all over again. I wanted her to read the timeline, and although she was taken aback, fear was evident on her face. We were usually so attuned, and her fear heightened my dread. I said I needed her to do this for me, and after a moment she did. It was crushing on D-Day when talking to other betrayed spouses, when she admitted the emotional affair, and it still was. The timeline covered from my wife being hired through D-Day, detailing how her friendship with her affair partner began. The workplace culture and how the affair partner presented himself were different. He joked with the guys, but didn't go along with nonsense, keeping his department intact. Their friendship grew, and he started venting about his home life, with her as a listening ear. He probed about her life. She told him about her mom relapsing, and as he grew bolder, she wished she'd spoken up, but was blinded by the view of him being one of the good ones at work. Co-workers mocked her for being his favorite. She didn't confide in me because I was dealing with my dad at the time, and she felt her problems were minor, so she vented to the affair partner. This began the emotional affair, and now he knew about issues I wasn't aware of. It hurt to hear because we always kept open communication. There was nothing we couldn't talk about, no matter what was going on. She was my first priority, and I would have been there for her. We were a team, a pair. The affair partner started flirting at work, exchanging texts, and she reciprocated. He hinted at a promotion for her. After the promotion, he hugged her, their first physical contact, joking that she could thank him later. During a team outing, they broke off, and he vented about other betrayed spouses and his kids. They went to his room under the pretense of celebrating her promotion. He turned on music, talked about the view, pulled her close, and started dancing. He kept saying how pretty she was. Eventually, he kissed her, and she froze up. Emotions weren't there. The affair partner groped her, and it led to closeness. She didn't peek, and he finished quickly, saying it was a hell of a celebration. She fell asleep, quietly left to her room, went into the shower, and scrubbed her body repeatedly, but still felt filthy. She didn't sleep and cried, thinking of me. The next morning, there was only one meeting, but she didn't go. The affair partner called, expressing disappointment, and suggested staying another day. She was barely replying, lied about being hungover, and he offered to cover for her at the meeting. He tossed the idea of them staying behind another day. She was afraid to tell me about what happened because she knew how cheating was a deal-breaker for me. She devised a plan to end the affair by limiting communication with her coworker to work-related matters. Returning home early, she was overwhelmed with guilt when we reunited, but she pretended that everything was normal. On Saturday morning, she initiated closeness in an attempt to erase her actions, but the regret intensified as she had been with her coworker without protection. On Monday, her coworker pulled her aside, and she suggested leaving the past behind as a mistake, but he resisted until another employee intervened. After the confrontation, she called her sister in a state of panic. My sister-in-law found out the same day I did. While there's more to the timeline, I condensed it as I read. She cried and took brief breaks to catch her breath. I wasn't holding up well either. Despite her repeated apologies and attempts to touch my hand, I withdrew from her. Needing to leave, I requested the timeline and departed. Inside my car, I broke down, and my mom, without saying a word, embraced me. I sat there crying in her arms like a little kid again. In no condition to drive, my mom drove us back. My wayward wife kept calling and texting, bombarding my mom's phone, but I assured my mom that I would handle it. When I eventually called back, she asked if I was okay, and I questioned why in the world I would be okay. She admitted I was right and apologized, acknowledging she was no better than my dad. She saw the timeline as a confrontation with herself, gaining clarity. She professed her love for me, emphasizing our journey from friends to best friends, and cherishing every moment with me. She regretted her choices at work, acknowledging they were minor compared to the pain I and other betrayed spouses experienced. She hated herself for potentially losing me and asked if I could find it within me to reconcile. She promised to spend forever showing me what our relationship means to her and to put in the work to make things right again. I couldn't respond, my right hand shaking. I only stated that I needed some space. Do I regret hearing the timeline? Not really, because I needed to know. Sometimes decision-making is challenging for me, and I might scrutinize it, but once made, I strive to stick to it. That's always been my way. I have always loved my wayward wife. We have been through a lot together, and I don't want to lose our relationship. However, I still feel broken when I think about what has happened. Individual counseling seems beneficial, as I did it for a year after my dad's affair. I also plan to pursue a polygraph and insist on a pregnancy test. Any thoughts or advice on this situation would be appreciated. Update: I found out more details after my wife shared the timeline of her affair with her coworker. Since she read her timeline, there hasn't been a peaceful moment. It hasn't been weighing heavily on me, and I still haven't slept well. I've been reading the timeline at least once every day, and with each reread, I go through a range of emotions: sadness, hurt, anger, and embarrassment. Sometimes I can't even express my feelings in words. I don't believe she was lying or altering the details. Everything aligns with what another betrayed spouse showed me. I think the timeline had a significant impact on her. While the affair is what it is, I do believe the affair partner targeted her. I'm upset that I was unaware and couldn't protect her. When we were 17, there was a troubling incident with her mom, and she sought comfort at my house. I promised to always protect her. I feel like I failed with the affair partner, not seeing his motives and relying solely on her word. On Friday night, I texted another betrayed spouse to see if we could talk. I wanted her input and to check on how she and the twins were doing. She called. Just after putting her kids to bed, she shared the challenges and her focus on the kids. She mentioned a bitter divorce in progress. The affair partner acts like the wronged party, puffing himself up. He hasn't apologized and is living at an extended stay. She changed the locks to keep him out. I inquired about the affair partner's history, past cheating, misaply of power. She understood my concern, suspecting past infidelities without proof. She mentioned an allegation 5 years ago at his previous job, reported to HR for retaliation. Nothing came of it, and the woman was viewed negatively. She ignored the signs because she was pregnant. There wasn't another allegation, and he had a great reputation. It took me a moment to process this information. I asked if he gave her a timeline, but she wasn't interested, wanting a divorce. She suggested her attorney for a consultation when I'm ready. I took the info and thanked her. We talked briefly about life post D-Day before ending the call. I felt more anger toward the affair partner. I believe he targeted my wayward wife, but she still had an emotional affair that grew, and I just feel deeply hurt, lost, and betrayed. I really hate all of this. Yesterday, I couldn't shake off what the other betrayed spouse said. My sister-in-law called, sounding troubled. She was worried about my wayward wife, believing she wasn't doing well and hadn't been eating. She asked if I had talked to her, but I hadn't since Thursday. My wayward wife has been respecting my request for some space. I didn't like hearing this at all. The thought of my wayward wife going through this and the days without contact or seeing her have been really tough. She asked if I could talk to her, but I had already decided to visit her. On the way, I stopped at a local restaurant she likes and ordered her usual meal to go. I went straight to our home without telling her beforehand. Part of me wondered if the affair partner might be there this time, but his car wasn't around. I found my wayward wife on the couch, looking like she was going through hell. Conflicting emotions hit me. Her choices brought this on, but I also wanted to comfort her. She sat up, surprised to see me. She moved to get up, probably to hug me, but she stopped herself. I showed her the food, telling her I needed her to eat. This caught her off guard, and she said I didn't have to, but I insisted. I helped her settle at the table, got her a drink, and she started eating. I asked about the affair partner, if he's been to the house. She said no. I asked to see her phone, and she handed it over without hesitation. While she ate, I checked her phone, but there were no new messages with the affair partner, and his number was still blocked. After she finished eating, I mentioned her sister's call, which surprised her. She promised she didn't ask her to do that and respected my space request, but I said it was okay. I wasn't bothered by the call. She said I shouldn't have to rush home, but I insisted our vows matter. She started tearing up, saying she ruined us, hurt me, and betrayed me. She admitted she's angry and disappointed in herself. At this point, her words hit me deeply, and I broke down. She kept saying she didn't deserve me and tore herself apart. She said she must regret being with her, and I cut in, saying my whole life was wrecked. But I didn't regret her. I reminded her of our history, the time she saved me, and how I never wanted to be apart from her. Before D-Day, we just cried without saying another word. I told her I needed to go, and as I left, she thanked me, understanding my need for space. She's not giving up on us and plans to start individual counseling. I nodded. My first counseling session is scheduled for Monday, but I still don't know how to proceed or feel any less lost. Every imaginable emotion is wrecking me, and I feel trapped in a maze.
Story 3.
Am I wrong for cutting off my girlfriend's daughter after my girlfriend cheated on me? I, 26 male, was in a relationship with my girlfriend, 26 female, for 6 years. I was engaged to her, and our marriage was scheduled in a few months' time. My girlfriend had a daughter at a really young age. Her ex left the state immediately after he heard she got pregnant. When I started dating my girlfriend, her daughter was 2. Over the past 6 years, I have pretty much considered her my own daughter and treated her as such. I had plans to legally become her stepfather after marriage. I loved my daughter so much. However, a couple of months ago, my girlfriend confessed she had been having an affair after I saw her texts from her coworker. The texts were so outrageous that she couldn't lie about the affair. She said she had been having the affair for a few months. I obviously canceled the engagement and the wedding and moved out a week later. My girlfriend's daughter was a bit confused, and it hurt me, but I really did not want to be around my girlfriend anymore. I have now completely cut off contact with both my girlfriend and her daughter. My girlfriend still texts me frequently and is asking me to reconsider at least maintaining a relationship with her daughter temporarily because her daughter has constantly been asking, "Where's Dad?" and even crying a lot. This does hurt me a lot, and I really wanted to maintain a relationship with my girlfriend's daughter. But the issue is that if I do go over to their house, I will have to see my girlfriend's face. And I just can't stand to see her anymore. I'm trying to leave it all behind and have already started going on new dates. Am I the a-hole? The community has a couple of thoughts. First up, say goodbye to the little girl, tell her the truth, or that you both don't love each other anymore, and that you still love her but have to leave. Somebody else says, not the a-hole. Write a lovely letter saying it's not anything she's done, it's just her mother and you are no longer friends. Give your ex's daughter a keepsake, maybe a small stuffed toy. Say you have an identical one, and when you see it, it reminds you of her and all the good times together. Firstly, Let me commend you on your Herculean efforts to be a stand-up guy in a situation where most people would be booking a one-way ticket to Nopeville. Years of playing daddy cool to your girlfriend's daughter, only to have the whole charade blow up in your face like a microwave burrito left in too long. Ouch. Now, on to the matter at hand. Are you the a-hole? In the grand scheme of things, probably not. You're not in a hole for wanting to wash your hands clean of your ex's mess, but leaving her daughter in the lurch without so much as a proper goodbye? That's a little cold, even for someone who's been burned worse than a slice of toast left in the toaster for an hour. Update: the guilt of not giving my ex's daughter closure was eating me up, so I decided to go see her. After a few hours, as her mom was on her way to pick her up, I told her that this would be the last time she would ever see me, and that it was not her fault at all. She broke down in tears and kept asking why, begging me to never leave. I lied and told her I had to move to a different country and would never come back. I told her that if she wanted to make me happy, she had to be good to her mom. I gave her a stuffed dog toy and also a letter. She was really emotional and cried a lot at the end, especially when her mom came to finally pick her up. I said my goodbyes and told her I would always remember her. That is probably my final update. Today was really heart-wrenching, especially seeing my ex's daughter cry like that. But I hope this gives her the closure she needs and that she understands it is not her fault. As for me, I will carry on with my life as usual. Although right now, I'm feeling extremely hurt and devastated. I have a nice job offer in another state, which I will probably accept. A change in scenery will probably be good for me and my mental health. And now for some community comments. First off, my heart is broken for her. I was 36 when I lost my papa, and I'm 40 now and still feel lost without him. I'm not a praying person, but I will do that for her. This is a heartache that won't ever go away. Someone else chimed in, my stepdad is still my dad. He was the only one I had from 2nd grade until 10th when my mom cheated and left a year before she died. My mom passed away 20 years ago, and my bio dad, whom I was no contact with, killed himself 17 years ago. My children call my stepdad Grandpa. OP, it's clear that making the decision to say goodbye was incredibly tough for you, but in doing so, you showed a profound understanding of the importance of looking after yourself, especially when faced with emotional turmoil. By offering closure to your ex's daughter, you displayed a remarkable level of compassion and empathy. Despite your own pain, you chose to prioritize her well-being, recognizing the significance of providing comfort and understanding during a difficult time. While your departure undoubtedly brought temporary sadness, it's important to remember that your intentions were pure. Your sincere desire to offer closure speaks volumes about the kind of person you are, someone who values kindness and consideration, even in the midst of personal challenges. What do you think? What would you have done? Up next, Op traded in her ex for someone who treats her like a queen. Eat your heart out, Karma. I think the Karma bus has arrived, and it's very different than I expected. 4 years ago, I was blindsided by my husband. I thought I was in this very rare, perfect marriage that was built to last. He was my best friend, favorite person, and he still turned me on easily even after 13 years. He came out of nowhere saying he had been unhappy for years. He loved me, but he was not in love with me. The coworker turned friend that had been plaguing my marriage, of course, had nothing to do with it. That was just coincidence. So, he left me and moved his coworker friend in almost immediately. But that was all a coincidence, because they fell in love while she helped him through his terrible divorce. Sure, I've been through hell and back, losing the in-laws who were like my own family, seeing friends pick his side because he wasn't a depressed mess and was fun to hang out with, feeling so unwanted, alone, and lost. I focused on making new friends, focusing on my job and health, taking trips with the light of my life, my doggo. Going into therapy, reading books, trying to let go, dating again, getting my heart broken, seeing how wounded I was, and how I was repeating some dynamics with other men. I finally settled for someone who loved me more than I would ever love him. Just so I didn't have to be scared of being abandoned. But I was miserable. A gray, fine life with a man who would never leave me, but also never treat me right. I didn't come this far just to get that far, so I started over. Somewhat done with dating, organizing myself to have a single existence, I was doing pretty awesome. But then I lost my best boy, which made me lose my rock, my confidence, my home. But I had to go on and make him proud. And then there was this man, who, just like me, was a chump, and after that wasted time on a fine relationship, was now ready to be alone. He was on dating apps for the same reason I was. Who knows? Could I have a good night, a good convo? For those who like the invisible string theory, this will make your day. We live and work outside each other's range, but I charge my car just inside his range every Friday. While I waited, I swiped. I didn't swipe him, nor would I have ever. He had looking for casual relationships listed because he didn't want to go too fast, but he wanted something serious. One night, my friend swiped for me, and she swiped him by accident. She didn't tell me. We went on a date and hit it off right away. He is everything I ever wanted and more. He makes me happy and giddy, and he scares the crap out of me because caring means being able to be hurt if he leaves me. While I am very scared to take this leap of faith, I just know I have to. We are planning trips, meeting each other's friends and family, and rocking each other's world. My ex is still with his mistress. Their relationship is nowhere near what me and my ex had. He treats her like a lesser person. He never did that to me, and I would never have taken it if he had. People gossip behind his back about how he could lose someone like me for someone like her. His friends and family still tell me they miss me, still tell me they don't get it. But here I am, having the best sex of my life, the most intense conversations, being spoiled and treated like a queen by a man I spoil and treat like a king. Someone who embraces my chaos and weirdness, just as he finally has someone who embraces his. Someone who matches my energy, who wants what I want. People keep saying that the best revenge is a life well lived, and it really is. It will take all your strength, and you need to do all the work. Forgive yourself for the mistakes you made, be fearless and do the hard things. Don't settle, and keep loving yourself as hard as you can. I just wish my good boy was here to see it. He saw me through the worst of times, and I just wish I could show him this new chapter and let him be part of it. He did meet him. On our third date, we went for a walk with my doggo in the forest. He died the very next day. I like to think he was ready because he knew I would be in good hands, but I know he's proud of me for taking a leap into the deep, knowing that whatever happens, I will survive and thrive. Because it's me. I love you, doggo. Hey, you didn't let that betrayal drag you down. Instead, you dusted yourself off, slapped on some lipstick, and strutted back into the dating scene like a boss. And wouldn't you know it? You stumbled upon someone who treats you like the royalty you are, while your ex is busy treating his mistress like yesterday's leftovers. You're out there having the best horizontal hula of your life and planning epic adventures with your new beau. Here's to you, living your best life and showing the world that nothing can keep a fabulous person like you down. Keep shining bright up. Lastly, sometimes the truth comes knocking, even if it's not in a cute little package. I told his wife, was this a bad decision? I had a short fling with a guy online, mid-30 seconds. He told me he was single and had been for years. According to him, he was looking for a girlfriend and intended to meet up with me for several dates to see if we clicked. He love-bombed me, sexted me like crazy for 2 days, sent me nudes and videos, called me beautiful, wonderful, amazing, and all the other pretty words that love-bombers use. After staying up all night texting me, he ghosted me and blocked me everywhere. This morning, I was a bit hurt, but mostly confused. I mean, this man seemed incredibly interested in me, explicitly so. Everyone I told about this said, almost sounds like his girlfriend saw your messages and he panicked. So, I Googled his Discord username. Idiot was dumb enough to have an Instagram page under the same username, with his full government name right on display. Googled his name, saw that his name is listed on Babelist. Jesus effing Christ, my heart dropped. Is this mother effer partnered with a baby? Looked him up on Facebook, yep. His child is newborn. I saw the pretty picture of him posing with his beautiful partner and child, right there on Facebook, as if he isn't an effing sleazebag. One of the comments was, what a happy little family. I just messaged his wife partner on her Facebook account. I didn't send her proof yet. I'm waiting for her to reply first. Update, I don't actually know if they're married. They don't have the same last name. And in my adrenaline rush, I assumed they were married, but I have no proof for this. Regardless, in their pictures, they very much look like a couple that lives together and has a baby with his last name. I rushed to tell her at absolute lightning speed. My ex did the exact same crap, constantly sexting women online behind my back because it doesn't count. But it does. It absolutely counts, and I would have wanted to know the truth. But my mom says I should have kept it to myself, at least for now, because she has an infant and doesn't need this added stress. She says that telling her will do nothing but destroy her life. What do you think? Should I have told her? Ask an opinion and you'll get some responses.
Story 4.
Years before, Olivia Hammond and Stephen had built a bright future together. Their shared goals and professional dedication made them a powerful, respected couple. Olivia's relentless drive in finance led to rapid promotions, while Stephen's talent in software design made him highly regarded. Though their demanding careers sometimes created emotional distance, they worked hard to build a family grounded in mutual values, always aiming to stay connected despite their individual ambitions. Over time, Olivia's career success brought her confidence and fulfillment, but sometimes distanced her from Stephen. Her focus on work evolved into a near obsession, subtly pulling her attention away from her husband and children. Outwardly, the family seemed stable, with Stephen ensuring the household ran smoothly and balancing their home life with steady support. Yet, beneath this surface, unresolved tensions and hidden issues began to accumulate, creating the quiet tension of an inevitable clash. One early morning, thin beams of light slipped through the blinds, softly illuminating the room. Olivia turned to look at her husband beside her. Even at 33, Stephen was impressively fit, defying the typical image of someone in tech. Watching him, she smiled. His arm lay draped over his face, shielding him from the morning light like a carefree sleeper able to rest anywhere. She noticed the clock. It was 20 minutes before her alarm. Smiling to herself, she savored the few quiet moments left before the day officially began. She began with a slow, gentle touch, moving Stephen's skin rhythmically over him. His body responded instinctively, his hips rocking in time with her hand. Olivia's smile grew. She enjoyed how easily she could stir him. She knew that her touch was all it took to spark his desire. Stephen groaned softly, calling Olivia an enchantress. She playfully agreed, shifting closer to him. As they came together, he took control, and their connection deepened with intensity. Olivia told her husband she would miss him, turning her back as the hot shower spray warmed her chest and stomach. He suggested that she could always cancel, while he continued to scrub her back with the large loofah. With a sigh, Olivia acknowledged she'd rather be with him and the girls, but explained she was close to sealing a deal she could almost taste. If successful, it would mean another $250,000 bonus, her second of the year, and she mused about the fun they could have with that. Stephen sighed, knowing from experience that there was no point in arguing or questioning their need for more money. He recalled a time when he was the top earner, though Olivia had long since surpassed him. Her ambition went beyond money or negotiation. It was about identifying weaknesses, strategizing, and winning. She was a hunter, always looking ahead to the next challenge. Even before one deal was finalized, her mind was on the next. He assured her he knew she'd succeed, remarking that she had the Midas touch, and everything she handled turned to gold. Olivia laughed, noting that she liked the term and considered it a valuable asset for a banker. In response, Stephen kissed the back of her neck and told her it was his turn, handing her the sudsy loofah. Then he maneuvered to face the shower spray directly, resting his hands on the cool tiles and tilting his face into the warm flow. At the sound of Olivia's heels, Stephen poured a coffee, black with 1 sugar, and slid it to an empty spot on the counter, winking at his giggling 6-year-old daughters. Noticing their laughter, Olivia asked what was so funny, kissing their heads before sitting beside Haley. Hannah giggled, explaining that she was the reason. Haley added that their dad said Olivia couldn't do anything before her coffee. Olivia paused, playfully examining her cup, as if it were something new, which only made the girls laugh more. Smiling, she admitted their dad might be right, joking that she'd better drink up. Otherwise, who'd braid their hair? Daddy? The girls squealed, insisting their dad was terrible at braids, with Haley reminding them how he once forgot their ribbons. Stephen, in mock despair, groaned about the tragedy of the forgotten ribbons, making everyone laugh. Switching to a serious tone, he urged them to get moving. Since Olivia's return to work, Stephen usually got the girls ready, leaving Olivia to do the finishing touches like hair and ribbons. Unless she had an early meeting, Stephen took the girls to school, while Olivia's office lay in the opposite direction. Today, with school on break, he planned to drive Olivia to the airport for her business trip to Melbourne, where she'd join other bankers to negotiate a multi-million-dollar deal. The girls would spend the day at the zoo with Mrs. Foster, who had been with the family since their birth. Though initially resistant to hiring help due to his blue-collar upbringing, Stephen soon saw the benefits. Mrs. Foster's help allowed Olivia to continue her studies, adding an economics degree and an MBA to her accounting credentials. Looking back, Stephen realized his reservations had been unfounded. Olivia was a dedicated mother, and Mrs. Foster was indispensable, managing the household, caring for the girls, and preparing family meals. Haley and Hannah adored her, seeing her as a cherished grandmother figure. While Olivia finished styling the girls' hair, Stephen quickly washed the breakfast dishes, feeling it was wrong to leave them for Mrs. Foster. Hearing the back door open, he smiled. Mrs. Foster's timing was always perfect. After the usual hugs and reminders for his daughters to behave and listen, Stephen grabbed Olivia's overnight bag and headed to the garage. Noting the bag felt heavy, he didn't comment. Olivia would have packed for every contingency. In the dimly lit garage, he put the bag in the trunk and opened the passenger door for Olivia. She settled in, placing her briefcase and handbag by her feet. As the garage door slowly opened, Olivia began chatting. I wonder if that coffee shop on Berkeley Street, the one with the bicycles on the wall, is still there. I don't know, it's been about 7 years. A lot could change, Stephen replied, feeling a twinge at the memory of Melbourne. Oblivious to his shift in mood, Olivia continued, hoping the coffee shop was still there and joking that she might even indulge in one of their amazing muffins. Since the girls were born, Olivia had been strict about carbs, meaning Mrs. Foster had adapted the family meals to meet her low-carb preferences. Stephen forced a small smile. Should I try to smuggle one back for you? I remember you liked the raspberry, cream cheese, and white chocolate one. Yes, I did, Stephen replied dryly as he navigated through familiar streets. But I think you cured me of that particular craving. Olivia's cheerful glow faded for a moment. Then she brightened, suggesting she'd find him a new treat. It'll be a surprise, she said. I'm sure it will, Stephen replied as they neared an intersection. He slowed down, signaling left toward the city. Just then, a gravelly voice from the back seat startled them. Change of plans, old boy. Turn left. Both reacted on instinct. Olivia screamed, twisting to look behind while Stephen gripped the wheel and hit the brakes, bringing the car to a sharp, jolting stop. Who are you? Olivia shouted, her gaze fixed on the Colt pointed at them. What do you want? Stephen demanded, his hands tightening on the wheel. Their assailant chuckled, savoring their fear. Who I am is your worst nightmare. What I want? That's a bit more complicated, but the real question is why you should do as I say. Why? Stephen asked through clenched teeth. 2 reasons, the man replied, raising the magnum slightly. First, I have a magnum. And second, I have your daughters. Chaos erupted as Olivia screamed and Stephen shouted, struggling to unbuckle himself while reaching for the intruder. Their captor simply leaned back, smiling, and asked dryly if they were finished once Olivia and Stephen finally fell into uneasy silence. Stephen demanded to know how they could be sure he had their daughters, while Olivia, with a defiant tone, asserted that the girls were at the zoo with Mrs. Foster. The man, rubbing his chin and stubble, challenged Olivia, asking if she was certain of that. The rasping sound of his fingers drew her attention to his face, and she noticed with a sinking feeling that, apart from sunglasses, he wasn't concealing his identity. Her stomach twisted, and she wondered if they would make it through the day. As 2 cars pulled up behind them and honked, the man ordered them to start moving and to turn left. When Stephen questioned where they were going, the man growled that he would tell them when he wanted them to know, pressing the tool into Stephen's side to emphasize his point. Stephen complied and followed the instructions. The man then demanded their phones, instructing them to hand them over slowly, without any tricks. He pocketed both phones in his vest, which bulged with unknown items, and then snapped his fingers at Olivia, demanding the other phone. Attempting to appear innocent and confused, Olivia hesitated, but it didn't work. The man insisted, telling her to stop playing games and hand over the second phone in her briefcase. Olivia placed her briefcase on her lap, retrieved the phone, and handed it over her shoulder to him, avoiding Stephen's gaze. Though she felt his eyes shifting between her and the road, his glare burning through her. Stephen's voice, tight with anger, questioned the presence of a second phone, but Olivia replied that it wasn't the time to discuss it. Their captor chuckled, agreeing with her, and telling Stephen that it was indeed not the time to question his wife's secret phone. Stephen glared at the man through the rearview mirror. The man continued, stating that this was the time to follow orders if they wanted to avoid anything unfortunate happening to their daughters. Olivia, with a challenging tone, argued that the girls had gone out for the day and didn't believe the man's claim. She accused him of lying, insisting they left when she and Stephen did. The man snarled in response, lifting his phone to eye level as he glanced between the screen and Olivia's face. After pressing a few buttons, he handed the phone to her. A quick look at the screen confirmed Olivia's worst fears. The man had their unlisted home number. She gasped, struggling for breath as panic rose within her. Mrs. Foster's voice came through, but it was shaky and hesitant, a stark contrast to her usual calm. It sounded as if she was close to tears, and Olivia felt a crushing weight in her chest, like a vice tightening around her. Hello? Mrs. Foster, it's Olivia. Oh God, I'm so sorry they've got us. They have the girls. I'm so sorry. I couldn't stop them. Olivia dropped the phone into her lap as if it had burned her, letting out a wail of terror, a raw, piercing sound. Both men flinched. They do, Stephen. They have the girls, Olivia sobbed, her shoulders shaking. Stephen pounded the steering wheel. What do you want from us? Why are you doing this? We're not super wealthy or famous. Why? Rich enough, Techie. Now hand back the phone, Mrs. What do you mean? What do you want? Just tell us, Olivia pleaded, passing him the phone. We'll do anything. Just don't hurt our girls. That's what I like to hear. Now, Stevie boy, take us to the National Australia Bank on Liverpool Street. Olivia and Stephen exchanged a glance. That was their bank. So, kids, what's the total? How much money do you two have stashed away? Stephen started to answer, but Olivia spoke first. About $250K, give or take. Stephen closed his eyes briefly, holding his breath. Tut, 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 Mrs. Have you forgotten what you just promised? That you'd do anything to save your daughters? Because you just lied to me. In the rearview mirror, Stephen saw the hijacker shake his head, disappointed. Let's see. What was that amount again? Oh, right. $322,054.75. Does that sound about right? Olivia and Stephen shared another glance. The amount was exact down to the cent. Olivia nodded. Yes, that's correct. No more lies, Livy girl, or I might start thinking you don't care about your rugrats. Please, Olivia begged, wiping her eyes on her jacket sleeve. Please don't hurt the girls. Do what I say and cut the nonsense. And your girls will be fine. Olivia nodded, more tears slipping down her cheeks. The man frowned at her. Pull yourself together. You need to make a withdrawal, and we don't want anyone suspecting a thing with you looking all weepy, do we? Olivia shook her head, fumbling in her handbag for tissues and makeup. Stephen remained silent, glancing occasionally in the rearview mirror at their captor. Each time, he quickly looked away when he found the man's gaze on him. From the corner of his eye, he could see Olivia using a small sponge to dab foundation under her eyes. The rest of the drive was tense and mostly silent, their strained breathing mixing with the hum of nearby traffic. Only one person in the car seemed unaffected. As they reached Liverpool Street, Stephen slowed, scanning for a parking space. Nervous, he struggled with a reverse park, prompting a laugh from their captor. Stephen's expression darkened further. For a moment, they stood in silence, focusing on the bank 30 yards across the street. Hearing their captor's door open, Stephen and Olivia followed, stepping onto the sidewalk and awaiting his instructions. He informed Olivia it was time to make a withdrawal, cautioning her against any signals or unusual behavior that might alert the staff. He warned that one misstep would mean she would never see her daughters again. Olivia accepted the briefcase, her eyes welling up as she nodded and acknowledged with a cracked voice. After a brief pause, she repeated her understanding, clearing her throat. Stephen remembered that withdrawals over $50K required 2 signatures and stopped Olivia to mention it. Their captor scrutinized Stephen, gauging him closely, and applied the same warning to him, stating that if he attempted any heroic actions, their daughters would be at risk. Stephen nodded reluctantly, agreeing. Their captor, with a laugh, remarked that $320K was a small price to pay for their daughters. Stephen nodded grimly in agreement. Taking the briefcase from Olivia, Stephen checked for traffic and crossed the road with her, pausing halfway before reaching the bank. He gave their captor a final nod before entering. Inside, they went to a counter. Stephen observed Olivia struggling with the withdrawal slip, her handwriting barely recognizable. Silently, he took the slip, crumpled it, and discarded it, filling out a new one himself and handing her the pen. Her hand was visibly shaking, her expression strained. He whispered for her to take a few deep breaths, reminding her they couldn't afford to make mistakes, and needed to focus on Haley and Hannah, who were depending on them. Olivia nodded, biting her lip as she signed, tears forming in her eyes as she muttered that he was taking everything they had worked so hard for. Stephen simply shrugged, uncertain of how to respond. Olivia then asked why they had been targeted, wondering if his firm was involved in anything sensitive or government-related. Stephen considered. He worked in security and surveillance software, but nothing warranted this. Shaking his head, he asked, "What about you? Have you upset anyone? Closed a bad deal? Passed over someone or triggered any layoffs?" Olivia looked distressed, a few tears slipping down her face as she discreetly brushed them away. She admitted she didn't know for sure, but mentioned that takeovers and mergers often lead to staff cuts. And some in her department resented her recent promotion, as merchant banking was still very much a man's world. Yet, To go so far as this, to take their daughters. She lowered her face into her hands, her shoulders shaking as she struggled to contain her emotions, repeating that she truly didn't know. Stephen observed her closely, realizing she wouldn't pass unnoticed with the bank teller. He advised her to go back to the car, assuring her he'd handle it alone, pointing out that one look at her would raise alarms, and they couldn't risk that. To his surprise, Olivia didn't argue. She gave him a grateful glance, lowered her head, and walked to the door without looking back. Taking a steadying breath, Stephen joined one of the queues. Stephen handed over the briefcase, telling their captor they had done what he wanted, and asking him to let them and their daughters go. Their captor looked around before fixing his gaze on Stephen, remarking that he saw no one there who could dictate terms to him. His expression hardened as he added that they would be done only when he decided, making sure Stephen understood. Stephen pressed his lips together and nodded. Turning to Olivia, the man looked her over with a mocking grin, questioning what had happened to the fearless negotiator and moneymaker he'd expected, suggesting she wasn't as tough under pressure as her reputation implied. Olivia's shoulders slumped, a look Stephen had never seen, even during their worst times in Melbourne. The man sneered further, taunting her, asking how it felt to lose everything she had worked for. Olivia's head shot up, her expression devastated as Stephen wrapped an arm around her protectively. Stephen quietly replied that they hadn't lost everything. Money wasn't all that mattered. They still had each other and their daughters. Their captor mocked him, calling him quite the philosopher, and warned them to keep following orders if they wanted their daughters safe. When Stephen began to argue that they had done as asked, the man interrupted with an imitation of a well-known TV character, saying, "But wait, there's more." Stephen braced himself, sensing there was another demand coming. He asked what more they could do, given that the man had already taken their money. Their captor replied that he needed them to make a delivery. Stephen and Olivia exchanged a look, confused as to why he would go to such lengths for a delivery. The money made sense, but this seemed strange. The man directed Stephen to head to Market Street. Stephen started the car, merging into heavy traffic, convinced they could have walked faster. As they passed Hyde Park, Stephen and Olivia remained blind to its beauty, but the captor noticed. He suggested to Olivia that she spend more time in the park during lunch hours, perhaps by the pool of reflection, reflecting on her life choices. Olivia, half turning in her seat, snapped back, asking what he meant by that. He replied smugly, telling her to stay calm, then hinted that it hadn't taken much to uncover the reason for their move from Melbourne to Sydney, implying she had been involved in something questionable. Stephen winced as Olivia gasped, casting a glance at him as he focused on the road ahead. Olivia defended herself, saying that it had been a long time ago, that Stephen had forgiven her, and that they had worked through it. She asserted that he had no right to bring up their past. The man replied that, on the contrary, his cult gave him all the rights he needed. He added that he wasn't one of her office minions, and noted that her colleagues and subordinates weren't too fond of her, speculating it might be due to her ambition, backstabbing, or demanding nature. Olivia ignored the insults, seeing no point in defending herself. Merchant banking was a brutal, cutthroat world where she'd had to be twice as ruthless as her male colleagues just to be taken seriously. After their time in Melbourne, she'd kept her competitive edge strictly for the workplace. She glanced at Stephen, noticing the pain the man's remarks had stirred, the tension around Stephen's eyes, the tight set of his mouth, and his grip on the wheel all showed the effort he was making to hold back his emotions. Watching his silent suffering, she even forgot their daughters for a moment. Stephen's pain was her own. She hated that her past actions had become a tool for their captor to use against him. Realizing just how deeply Melbourne still affected him, she urged him not to listen, reminding him that the captor was trying to divide them and that Melbourne was long behind them. They were happy, they loved each other, and they had their daughters. The man began clapping mockingly, picking up speed before laughing. "Bravo," he sneered. Furious, Olivia demanded to know why he was doing this, how he knew so much about them, and why he'd gone to such lengths to investigate their lives. She reminded him they were neither famous nor extremely wealthy. The man told her his reasons were his own and warned her to watch her attitude, threatening that one phone call could change everything. Stephen quietly told Olivia to stop and just follow the man's orders, then asked where on Market Street they were headed. The man replied, instructing them to go to 100 Market Street, and asked if they knew who occupied the 5th floor. Stephen admitted he didn't, bracing himself for the significance behind the address. He noticed Olivia had gone pale, her hands clenched tightly in her lap, her knuckles white. In the rearview mirror, Stephen caught their captor smiling smugly back at him. The man turned to Olivia, asking if she knew who was on the 5th floor. Olivia turned to look out the window, refusing to respond, and the man simply chuckled. Stephen turned left and began searching for parking, knowing it wouldn't be easy in the inner city. Luck seemed to favor him, or was it the man's plan, as he found a spot just 100 yards from their destination. They climbed out of the car once more. Olivia looked tense and wary, while Stephen appeared tightly wound, every muscle ready to spring. Their captor handed Stephen a thick, document-sized envelope, its contents unknown but clearly substantial. Olivia stepped back, her gaze fixed on the envelope. Stephen glanced at her, but she avoided his eyes. Unexpectedly, the man handed Stephen a phone, watching them with amusement. He informed them he might have further instructions, warning them against any attempts at heroism and reminding them of their daughters. Then he repeated the directive. 5th floor, number 100. Both nodded and began walking toward the office building, but the man stopped them, telling Olivia she was staying behind while Stephen delivered the package alone. Stephen cast another questioning look at Olivia, but she once again avoided meeting his gaze. As soon as Stephen was out of earshot, the man turned to Olivia. "Can you guess what's in the envelope?" he asked. Olivia nodded, looking miserable. He taunted her further, suggesting she had perhaps become too ambitious or started believing her own lies. She replied dejectedly, admitting that he probably already knew, as everything in the deal depended on it. The man shook his head, clearly enjoying her discomfort. "Insider trading," he remarked, emphasizing the severity. "ASIC doesn't look kindly on people who cheat and break laws," he added, hinting at serious consequences if Stephen delivered that envelope to the Australian Securities and Investments Commission. Olivia's head dropped, her spirit defeated. If the envelope contained what she feared, her career was over, and life as she knew it would change forever. Stephen would be crushed, disappointed, and might not stand by her. She dreaded the thought of explaining herself to her daughters, imagining a bleak future filled with courtrooms and possible prison time. The man offered her a lifeline, saying he'd allow her one phone call to convince Stephen not to deliver the envelope. She looked up, uncertain if he was serious, but hope surged when he extended a phone to her. She seized it hastily, afraid he might withdraw the offer. A quick look confirmed to Olivia that the phone she'd been handed was her burner phone, intentionally chosen by the man, judging by his knowing expression. She felt a brief pang of guilt, but suppressed it. The man told her there was only one rule. She couldn't reveal that he'd allowed her this opportunity. Olivia took a deep breath to steady her shaking hands and dialed Stephen's number. He answered uncertainly. Olivia urged him not to deliver the letter. Stephen replied that he had to, as the man would harm their daughters if he didn't. Olivia pleaded with him to trust her and not deliver it. Stephen questioned why she would risk the girl's safety, reminding her that he couldn't simply disregard the man's orders. She insisted again, asking him to trust her and promising that the man would never know if he tossed it in a trash can. As she spoke, she glanced at the man, who smirked. Stephen, sounding conflicted, asked what was in the envelope that was worth such a risk. Unable to explain, Olivia asked him again to trust her, stressing that it was crucial for both of them. She pleaded with him to throw the envelope away. The man motioned for her to end the call. She made one final plea. "Please, trust me. Don't deliver it." Then she hung up, feeling shaky as she returned the phone, her heart racing. She hoped Stephen would listen, knowing she'd never risk their daughters. The man mocked her, asking if she was familiar with honesty and suggesting she question who the real criminal was, him or herself. The taunt hit close, and she turned away, her cheeks burning. After a moment, Olivia saw him take another phone from his vest, her actual phone, recognizable by a small scuff. He pressed a few buttons, unlocking it with her pin as if he knew everything. "Olivia!" she heard Stephen's voice loudly through the distance. The man replied coldly, "Sorry, it's not the missus, it's your worst nightmare. When you get to the 5th floor, have someone take a photo of you handing over the envelope. Just make it happen." "Okay," Stephen responded, his tone hesitant. Olivia silently pleaded for Stephen to trust her, knowing he'd understand she would never risk the girls. She prayed intensely, more than she ever had, even during their troubles in Melbourne. Every passing minute stretched her nerves taut. What was taking so long? Finally, Stephen approached them, the envelope no longer visible. Had he thrown it away or delivered it? He moved slowly, his gaze down, avoiding eye contact with both her and the captor. Without a word, the man extended his hand for the phone, which Stephen handed over. The man opened it and navigated to the photos folder, leaving Olivia tense and breathless as she sent up one final desperate prayer. The man held out the phone to Olivia. On the screen, Stephen stood beside a smiling brunette who accepted a thick, ochre-colored envelope. Olivia collapsed in despair, feeling as if her world had shattered. Her knees hit the pavement, but she barely noticed the impact. With her face in her hands, she sobbed, asking why Stephen had delivered the envelope, why he hadn't trusted her. Stephen moved toward her, but the man held him back, taunting Olivia about feeling betrayed, saying it wasn't pleasant to have her husband choose him over her. Ignoring the man, Stephen leaned down to help Olivia to her feet, holding her close and soothing her. The man sneered, suggesting that perhaps Stephen's good guy nature was why Olivia didn't respect him, lacking the butcher instinct. Angered, Stephen released Olivia and lunged at the man. They scuffled briefly, throwing punches, while the surrounding pedestrians ignored them and steered clear. The man hissed a reminder about Stephen's daughters, which made Stephen deflate, his energy suddenly gone. Olivia felt his frustration like a cold breeze. The man ordered them back to the car, snapping that they'd drawn enough attention. Once they were seated, Olivia turned and pleaded with him, saying they had done everything he asked, that he had taken their money and destroyed her career, begging him to let them and their daughters go. The man refused, stating they had one more delivery to make. Olivia slumped forward, her mind racing, wondering what more he could possibly do to them. When Stephen asked where to, the man replied, "Chatswood," prompting Stephen to groan. Olivia, now anxious, turned to Stephen and asked if he'd done something illegal, worried about the possibility that their daughters would be left without parents. Stephen looked hurt at the assumption and assured her that while he hadn't done anything illegal, he might have done something stupid. When Olivia asked for details, Stephen admitted it was nothing more than a few careless internal emails about a new client, joking with his colleague Tom about how clueless the client seemed despite his wealth. Relieved, Olivia relaxed, realizing it wasn't as serious as she'd feared. Stephen added, though, that it might be enough to get him fired. The man chuckled, sarcastically commending Stephen's deduction skills and remarking that it would be a shame if his employer decided to let him go. Stephen jerked the car into traffic, cutting off a Toyota and earning a loud honk, which he answered with a rude gesture. Their captor just laughed. Stephen weaved through lanes, accelerating to beat the light before it turned red. Their captor smirked, commenting on their hurry, and Stephen replied that he just wanted it over with. Silence settled, tension filling the car as Stephen and Olivia fell into thought, while their captor watched them closely. Olivia stared out the window, puzzled by the man's motives. Why was he systematically destroying them? Was this revenge for Stephen's remarks about a client? The reasoning seemed extreme. In any case, the why hardly mattered now. By the day's end, their money would be gone, Stephen's job at risk, and her own future uncertain. Worst of all, her thoughts turned to her daughters. She prayed they were safe with Mrs. Foster, as the thought of harm coming to them was unbearable. Stephen, barely holding it together, just wanted to be home with his girls. Whatever consequences came later, he would face them. The nightmare of crossing the harbor bridge passed, and on the familiar North Shore, Stephen parked near the client's office. Turning to the man, he asked who would make the delivery. Their captor, smirking, replied that Stephen might as well handle it, reminding him to follow the usual drill: a photo, no tricks. Handing Stephen a phone and a thinner envelope than the last, he told him to have fun, laughing at his own sarcasm. Olivia glared at him. They watched Stephen walk to the building, his steps purposeful. Olivia turned to their captor, demanding to know why he was so cruel, punishing Stephen and taking their daughters if his issue was with her. He simply replied that all would be revealed, adding with a grin that she needed to put some fun into her workday. When Olivia snapped back, asking if he actually called this fun, he warned her to calm down, reminding her he still had her daughters. Reluctantly, Olivia fell silent, her natural drive to take charge restrained. She felt off balance and helpless, a feeling she despised as failure wasn't in her vocabulary. Olivia watched the street anxiously, waiting for her husband. When Stephen finally rounded the corner, he looked defeated, and her heart sank. She knew he must feel the same helplessness and fear she did. As a loving father and a proud man used to being in control, it must be agony for him to be unable to protect his children. Without a word, Stephen got into the car, handed the phone to their captor, and buckled his seatbelt, hands on the wheel, awaiting the next instruction. Their captor chuckled at the photo, remarking that Stephen could have at least smiled. Stephen held back a retort, and Olivia reached over, squeezing his arm in comfort, receiving a grateful smile in return. The man taunted them, asking if they were curious about the next destination. Stephen replied tersely, saying the man would tell them in his own time, acknowledging that he was in charge. Their captor laughed, suggesting Stephen would make a good officer for following orders, even when he disagreed. Stephen glanced at him sharply in the mirror, and the man casually mentioned knowing about Stephen's military background, noting he'd worked safely behind the scenes, while others handled the risks. Stephen retorted with anger, defending his intelligence work as life-saving and warning the man not to mock him or his fallen friends, vowing he'd tear him apart if he harmed his daughters. The man, unbothered by Stephen's outburst, simply advised him to stay calm and keep following orders to ensure his family's safety. Olivia sensed Stephen's frustration with the response. The man's words hinted that they had more obstacles ahead before he'd release them and their daughters. She clung to the belief that they'd all survive the day. After a moment, their captor suggested they take a drive to the Hawkesbury River, mentioning a B&B with water views. Olivia stiffened, realizing that the whole day had been about her. She struggled to maintain her composure, wondering how he could know about her secret. She'd been so careful. No patterns, no set meetings or meals outside the office. Logan was the only one who knew, her colleague and lover, the one who was supposed to pick her up after Stephen dropped her off. Together, they'd secured 2 massive deals worth billions for the bank. Fury surged through Olivia. Her career was destroyed, her family endangered, and her husband's job at risk, all for a meaningless affair. Logan was nothing more than a brief indulgence after their first big deal, an occasional fling. Neither of them had seen harm in one more celebration after their latest deal. But now, that choice had put her entire life and family in jeopardy. Realizing that the day's events were tied to her indiscretion still didn't clarify who was orchestrating it all. It couldn't be Stephen. He'd suffered as well, and she knew he couldn't bring himself to hurt her. If anything, he'd react as he had after her affair in Melbourne, crushed, withdrawn, and asking what he lacked. And Mrs. Foster's terrified call ruled out any possibility of Stephen's involvement. Could it be Logan? Maybe he wanted to discredit her and eliminate her as competition. He was certainly ambitious and ruthless, but would he risk being implicated himself? Then there was Logan's wife. Coming from old money, she had the resources and connections to pull something like this off. For all Olivia knew, Logan might be facing similar torment. Olivia's frustration grew. Her strategic mind, usually so sharp, couldn't pinpoint who was behind this. Their captor taunted her, asking if she'd figured it out. Stephen turned to her, confused, asking if she knew why this was happening. Olivia wrestled with herself. Her intellect urged her to twist the truth, spin the situation to save herself from a painful confession. But her heart said enough was enough. Her choices had hurt Stephen and put her family at risk. It was time for honesty. "Yes, I do. It's all my fault." Stephen, shocked, asked what she meant. Olivia, filled with remorse, felt a pang of guilt knowing that because of her, they'd lost their money. Stephen's job was in jeopardy, and their daughters were in danger. She'd brought this upon them by breaking the law. She struggled to explain, but their captor interrupted, urging her to get to the point. Stephen sat tensely, his hands on the wheel, waiting. "Stephen, with this latest deal, I bent the law," she admitted. The man corrected her, saying she'd broken it. Olivia sighed, acknowledging she had indeed obtained insider information for the client. The deal hinged on this knowledge. Stephen stared at her, incredulous, confirming, "You broke the law and risked our family for a deal?" She tried to justify it, mentioning the substantial bonus they would have earned. But seeing the disgust in Stephen's eyes, she trailed off, feeling devastated. Their captor rebuked her, remarking that honesty and integrity mean doing the right thing, even when no one's watching. Olivia flinched, realizing the irony of a hijacker lecturing her on morality was lost on her in that moment. Then the man pressed her further, his gaze cold, expecting her to reveal everything she'd tried to hide. Head hanging, eyes closed, Olivia spoke in a barely audible voice, explaining that she and Logan Priest led a small, close-knit team for these deals. They worked closely, too closely, she admitted with difficulty, confessing that she and Logan had slept together as a sort of in-house congratulations. At that moment, the car door opened. Olivia looked up, expecting Stephen to leave, but he remained seated, staring at her with a look that bordered on hatred. She recoiled as if struck, realizing that their captor had vanished, leaving only his vest behind. Confused, Olivia looked around, noticing that the briefcase with their savings was gone. She panicked, asking Stephen what had happened, why the man had left, and how they would secure Haley, Hannah, and Mrs. Foster's release. Stephen replied that the man hadn't taken the money. When Olivia, still bewildered, pressed for answers, he turned the tables, asking how it felt to be kept in the dark, confused and powerless, just as she had kept him. She begged him to explain, but he continued with a cold, pointed question about whether she liked feeling left out and afraid. Finally, Stephen revealed he knew everything about Logan Priest, the insider trading, and the fling after their previous deal. He mentioned her so-called Midas touch, sarcastically noting that Logan seemed to have it too. Olivia stared, shocked, a deep blush betraying her guilt. She'd thought she had been careful, but he knew everything and had kept it from her. Overwhelmed, Olivia felt sick, opened the car door and vomited, trying to collect herself as she realized Stephen's involvement in the day's events. She confronted him, accusing him of orchestrating the torment and putting their daughters in danger. Stephen calmly assured her the girls were fine, safe at home with Mrs. Foster, who had believed she was helping him play a prank that Olivia would appreciate later. Dumbfounded, Olivia whispered, "Oh my God," unable to recognize the man beside her. She accused him of taking all their money, but Stephen moved the vest aside, revealing their phones and instructing her to check the banking app, explaining he had only withdrawn $100. Stunned, Olivia understood it had all been an elaborate setup. She asked who the man was, to which Stephen replied simply, "No one you know." From Stephen's tone, Olivia realized there was no point in asking further about the man's identity. "And the papers you delivered to ASIC?" she asked. "You wanted me to go to jail? You must truly hate me." Stephen shrugged, explaining that the envelope had been full of blank paper. ASIC had received nothing but a stack of emptiness. Relief washed over Olivia, making her weak. "So the delivery to your client was fake too?" Stephen nodded. "Why go to all this trouble?" she asked, genuinely puzzled. "Why do you think?" he replied. "I don't know, Stephen. I don't even know who you are anymore." Stephen gave a slight smile. "Maybe you don't. Congratulations, you wanted me to have a butcher instinct, and now I have it." "Please don't say that," she whispered. "I love you just as you are." Ignoring her words, Stephen asked if she really wanted to know why he'd done this. She nodded, though she sensed the answer would hurt. "I wanted you to experience a fraction of what I've felt for the last 6 months, or since Melbourne, really. If I'd just had an affair or divorced you, you wouldn't have understood the depth of my feelings. I needed you to feel the betrayal, the abandonment, the pain and worthlessness a betrayed spouse feels. You felt it for a day. I've been living with it for months, if not years. Oh, Stephen, I'm so sorry. I never meant to hurt you," she began. He cut her off. "The 2 worst moments of my life involve you. Do you know what that means? I've sent friends into dangerous situations and lost them. But what you did hurt more because it's about the one person who was supposed to love and respect me above all else." "But I never disrespected you," she protested, reaching to touch his arm, which he shook off. "To me, respect isn't hiding an affair or stopping your lover from insulting me. By cheating, you disrespected my feelings, our vows, and the beliefs I trusted you understood, especially after Melbourne." Stephen paused, looking out the window, grappling with the weight of what he wanted to say. He decided to say it all now and move forward, knowing that holding on to bitterness would only harm him. It was like sipping poison and expecting the other person to die. "Being betrayed felt like a living death," he said. "The first casualty was our past. What of it was real, and what was a lie, I'll never truly know. Do you know what the second thing to die was, Olivia?" Olivia, with tears streaming down her face, shook her head. Stephen spoke firmly, saying that their future was the second victim, destroyed by her repeated betrayals and lies. "We don't have a future together anymore, Olivia. You liquidated it." Desperate, Olivia pleaded for another chance, reminding him he'd forgiven her once and promising it would never happen again. She even offered to move if he wanted. Stephen shook his head. "You think this is third time lucky? You vowed to be faithful on our wedding day, and you broke that. 7 years ago, you promised again to be faithful, and you broke it again." He explained that repeated betrayals erode love and respect bit by bit, until all that remains is distrust and resentment. He'd tried hard to forgive her after Melbourne, wanting to see only the woman he'd fallen in love with, but instead he saw her darker, dishonest side. "Funny thing is, I almost managed to forgive until I noticed signs again. At first, I told myself it couldn't be happening, but the doubts grew, and when I checked, my worst fears were confirmed. You were betraying me all over again." Stephen admitted that now he only saw the deceitful side of her, saying the girl he'd married seemed to have vanished. Olivia insisted she was still the same person, apologizing and explaining that she'd gotten caught up in the thrill of winning. She'd felt invincible, saying Logan was just part of the game with no real emotion involved. To her, it was just sport, like a victory lap. Stephen looked at her with pity. That's where we differ. For you, it's just a physical act. But for me, it's deeply personal, a physical expression of love. Sex isn't just sport, it's intimacy. Olivia acknowledged his perspective, but argued that not everyone sees intimacy and love as intertwined, hinting that part of his hurt might be tied to pride and ego, seeing someone else play with his toys. Enraged, Stephen rejected her suggestion, saying he was hurt because his love ran deeper than simple jealousy. Just because you're a woman doesn't mean you have a monopoly on emotion. From what I see, you're the one who lacks real feeling. Olivia recoiled, shocked by the depth of Stephen's anger. He had never spoken to her with such venom, not even after Melbourne. For the first time, she felt a hint of fear toward him, the car suddenly feeling claustrophobic. But Stephen wasn't finished. Well, Olivia, you won't have to worry about hurting my ego anymore. Now you can be with anyone you want. Any Tom, Dick, or Harry. I don't care. I want a partner who shares my values, and clearly that's not you. It's time we go our separate ways. Olivia protested, insisting she loved him and believed he still loved her. But Stephen shrugged. Once I did. I used to love smoking too, but I quit when I realized it was a risk to my health. Staying with you would be just as risky, to my mental and emotional health and my future happiness. Trusting you again would be stupid, and I'm done being stupid. She pleaded, promising to make up for her mistakes and vowing never to risk his love again. Stephen sighed, realizing she still didn't understand. He offered an analogy, asking her to recall the best thing they did with the girls last summer. Olivia guessed it was their trip to Whitewater World, which the girls had talked about for months afterward. Exactly, Stephen replied. That's what your affairs are like to you, a thrill. The ordinary things I do can't compare to the excitement of Mr. Three-Piece Suit, the high-powered banker. I'm not exciting or forbidden, just the guy at home. You'll always have those memories, those little escapes from married life. I won't compete with the fantasy, Olivia protested, insisting she wouldn't compare him to those past flings. But Stephen shook his head sadly. You're in denial, Olivia. Have you never thought of them when I'm out of town or even when you're away? Unable to answer, Olivia knew he was right. She had remembered and even fantasized about those memories. Stephen continued, knowing her silence confirmed it. It's bad enough that you think about them when I'm not around. Imagine lying beside you, night after night, wondering if you're dreaming of someone else. You've never felt that kind of soul-crushing doubt. When Olivia tried to speak, Stephen gripped the wheel, lightly banging his head against it. She looked on in alarm, worried he'd finally reached his breaking point. Enough, Olivia, Stephen said firmly. Did you learn nothing from today? Every part of it was meant to make you feel deeply. Pain, fear of loss, powerlessness, betrayal, abandonment, anger. I know you felt them. I watched you. Why do you think I orchestrated it? I don't know, Olivia whispered. To punish me? No, not punishment. I needed you to feel what I felt over the last 8 months. I never thought I'd feel that way about you again after Melbourne, but I have. You did that to me. Remember today. Maybe next time a man loves you, you'll think twice before betraying him. Please, Stephen, don't give up on us. I need you. I love you. Growing old together is what I want. My time with Logan, it wasn't love, it was just meaningless, like playing a game of squash. Olivia, you keep missing the point. It might not have meant anything to you, but it meant something to me. Our relationship wasn't just about you. You destroyed my love for you, our life together, for what you call recreational intimacy. That makes me want to rip out your heart, because that's what you did to mine. Want to hear some statistics about lovemaking? Without waiting for a response, Stephen continued. The average person spends about 6 months of their life having sex. That's it. Women spend double that time just deciding what to wear. That's what you threw me away for. Something you spend less time on than choosing your shoes. Stephen shook his head, running a hand through his hair. Enough. This is pointless. You don't understand, and maybe you never will. Stephen's words echoed in Olivia's mind. You don't understand. Maybe you never will. She recalled her own fear, betrayal, and loss today, realizing it was nothing compared to what she had made him feel. She held back tears, seeing how deeply she had wounded the man she loved. Deep down, she'd assumed that if she was ever caught, he'd forgive her as he had before. What arrogance. She realized she had truly disrespected him and driven him to extreme measures to make her understand. Panicked, Olivia tried to express her regret and love, but Stephen held up his hand, stopping her. Enough. he said again. He checked the rearview mirror, started the engine, signaled, and pulled into traffic. Do you like making deals, Olivia? Stephen asked, though he didn't wait for her answer, both knowing it was rhetorical. Here's the deal. You buy an apartment, I'll buy one. The girls stay in the house with Mrs. Foster. It wouldn't be fair to deprive them of the only home they know just because you couldn't resist rewarding yourself with recreational intimacy. Olivia flinched, realizing how ridiculous her own words sounded coming from him. Stephen continued, either unaware or indifferent to her reaction. That means you and I will handle the back and forth. 1 week on, 1 week off. No child support or alimony for either of us. We set up a joint account to cover household and child-related expenses. Regardless of personal feelings, we keep things civil. I won't say anything negative about you, and you'll do the same for me. If we're at the same event, we'll be polite. Stephen's calm, matter-of-fact tone unnerved Olivia. She had never seen this side of him before. And make no mistake, Olivia, there will be no negotiation. It's take it or leave it. If you cause me grief or fight me on this, I'll drop all intentions of shielding the girls from the truth. I'll hand-deliver the real documents to ASIC. Personally, that's exactly what I'd do. I'd enjoy sitting in the courtroom watching the prosecution tear you and Loverboy apart. I'd laugh at your sentencing, the longer the better. You're just lucky you gave me 2 wonderful daughters. For them, I'll show restraint. For them, I'll hold back from burying you. Olivia stared out the window, seeing nothing, realizing that she'd had her awakening far too late. She recognized defeat. She'd seen it enough times on the other side of a negotiating table. Her marriage was over. She had lost. Olivia sat in the front of the church, her eyes drawn to the beautiful stained glass windows. Without turning, she knew that Stephen and his wife Lauren were seated at the opposite end of the pew. Lauren. How Olivia loathed her. 10 years younger, with a completely different look. Fair-haired, petite, blue-eyed, and angelic, compared to Olivia's darker, sultry features. But it wasn't her appearance or age that fueled Olivia's dislike. It was that her daughters adored Lauren, that Stephen loved her, and looked at Lauren the way he once looked at her. Now Stephen treated Olivia as if she were invisible, and had done so for over 2 decades. Olivia despised that, even after 22 years, she still missed Stephen. She wished she could hate him for that, but he remained the standard by which she measured all other men. She resented Lauren for embodying everything she wasn't, for the way her daughters raved about her, hugging her often. They should have felt that way about her, their real mother. Instead, they were more formal with her. Hadn't she shown them a woman could have both a career and a family? Set an example as a successful businesswoman. Wasn't she always perfectly groomed and slender, with good taste and culture? Why then was it Lauren they admired and confided in? Yes, Lauren owned a chain of fashion boutiques, and her daughters proudly told her Lauren had worked her way up from the bottom. But did that make her the girls' go-to person? Olivia knew her thoughts were unfair, but she couldn't help it. In her mind, Lauren had taken her place as both wife and mother. Glancing to her right, she noted Mrs. Foster's profile, feeling a slight satisfaction at seeing age catching up with her. Mrs. Foster, too, adored Lauren, a fact that baffled Olivia. She didn't understand why the girls had insisted Mrs. Foster attend. They hadn't needed a nanny in years, but Stephen had insisted she stay on in her cottage after the girls finished high school. The organ music drifted in the background as Olivia tried to let it soothe her sour mood. Her foul temper had started the previous afternoon when she learned that head office had promoted a young woman she'd mentored, someone she felt had outmaneuvered her for a promotion she believed was hers. It was the 3rd time in 5 years she'd been overlooked, and it stung. The priest clearing his throat brought her back to the moment. She wasn't sure why Haley wanted her firstborn son baptized, given they'd never been a church-going family. Olivia suspected it must have been her son-in-law Jasper's influence. Olivia listened with half an ear as the priest continued with the usual ceremonial words. Her attention shifted when she saw Haley turn toward the family and friends gathered. For a brief moment, their eyes met before Haley's gaze moved to her father and Lauren. Then Olivia heard the priest invite Haley's parents to come forward. She placed her purse on the floor and stood, but she frowned as Lauren also rose, walking toward Haley and Jasper with her hand clasped in Stephen's. A light touch on her arm made Olivia glance down. Mrs. Foster whispered gently, "Not you, dear. Haley and Jasper have asked Stephen and Lauren to be Cody's godparents." Embarrassed, Olivia sank back into her seat, feeling stunned as Haley began a speech about why she had chosen her father and Lauren to be godparents. Haley praised her father, saying he had been as close to a perfect father as possible, knowing when to be tough or soft, when to scold or forgive, and always showing her and Hannah they were his priority. She then spoke to Lauren, saying she aspired to be like her, that both she and Hannah often asked themselves, what would Lauren do? Haley thanked Lauren for loving her and Hannah as if they were her own, and expressed how, if anything were to happen to her and Jasper, they couldn't imagine better people to raise Cody. Tears rolled down Olivia's face, not from joy, but from sadness, pain, and anger. She felt betrayed that Haley would give such a speech, knowing her mother was there, humiliated and hurt. Olivia wanted to storm out, but staying seemed the only way to avoid further embarrassment. As she stewed in her resentment, a small voice within grew louder, demanding her attention with each passing moment. You reap what you sow. A flood of past images surged through Olivia's mind, each one a reminder of missed opportunities. Missed birthdays, events, breakfasts, bedtimes. Moments when she could have been there for her daughters but had chosen work instead. In the beginning, it had been easier to leave more of their care to Mrs. Foster, avoiding her daughters' sad, questioning eyes and their awkward questions about why she and their father took turns living with them. Guilt made staying away simpler, and immersing herself in her career became a refuge from her shame and responsibility. The more she worked, the more relief she felt. After all, it was easier to kiss a sleeping child than to face a hurt, wakeful one. Later, the distance became routine, everyone accepted it, and before she knew it, her daughters were off to college. By then, they no longer needed her. The realization struck her deeply. For most of her adult life, she had made the wrong choices, prioritizing avoidance over acceptance, material success over love, career over family. And now, even that career was fading. Olivia leaned back against the hard pew, feeling utterly alone. Haley's speech had made it clear. Olivia wasn't truly her mother in the way that mattered. She was just the egg donor. She could no longer deny the truth. She'd failed in her most important role. Stephen, Lauren, her daughters, and their families had a tight-knit circle of love and support. Olivia had no one. She would never be part of their inner circle, would never know the love they shared. Defeat and loss, she realized, were worse than death. Death offered an escape. Defeat and loss demanded she live with her choices.